Global ice ceiling. I build a technology tree in a shelter introduction. The mysterious alien spacecraft crashed into the North Pole, triggering an unprecedented severe cold wave. Both the Altai Mountains and the Qinling Mountains failed to prevent the cold weather from moving southward. A few days later, the lowest temperature in tropical regions dropped to -30 degrees Celsius, and the world entered an ice age. Only humans who initially hid in shelters survived. Faced with extreme cold disasters, Rosen. Chapter 1. Southward Cold Current. You are listening at novelfull.audio. NASA previously observed a spherical metal object falling from space towards the North Pole of Blue Star. Judging from its shape, the object resembles space debris and may be a large component detached from a satellite. The satellite malfunctioned due to component detachment, which has the potential to cause serious chain reactions. NASA immediately took it seriously and conducted telemetry data checks on America's satellite through observation instruments on the satellite. It was found that everything was normal and there were no faulty satellites. Another doubt has been brought to the forefront. In theory, parts detached from satellites would form space debris orbiting the equator, making it impossible for them to crash into the Arctic region, even if it was not an artificially designed expected crash. In addition, if countries make early scrapping plans for old satellites that have expired their service, the satellites will also crash to the Nemo Point, which is a place located in the center of the Pacific Ocean, far from any human civilization, and is also a planned site for the unified crash of space debris. With doubts in mind, NASA immediately contacted the American authorities and reported the relevant situation. The authorities' direct reaction was to speculate that it was an unidentified flying object UFO. Due to the authorities' obsession and importance towards aliens, they immediately notified the members of the American expedition stationed in the Arctic, requesting them to retrieve the spherical object that had fallen to the Arctic as soon as possible, and to elevate the importance of the mission to level 1, naming it Operation Iceship. In order to study intelligence related to unidentified flying objects, America established a secret Zone 51 in the early years. Relevant information indicates that they have mastered the technology of spacecraft anti-gravity, and have also developed anti-gravity aircraft, TR.3. The American members of the inspection team were well aware of the seriousness of the task and the urgency of it. Despite refusing to inform the organization, they secretly operated and secretly drove away one of the organization's inspection ships overnight to deeply detect the fall of metal balls. It should be noted that the ship was equipped with a large number of the world's most advanced operational instruments, including large metal detection and radar detection devices. The inspection ship worked day and night, avoiding a large number of floating glaciers, and finally discovered the metal ball observed by NASA in a glacier located at 75 degrees north latitude. In an instant, all the members on the inspection ship were shocked. That is a metal ball with a diameter of 1 kilometer, and its volume is so large that no wonder it can be discovered by the inspection team. And now it's not a matter of whether it can be discovered, but rather such a huge object that the inspection team cannot take away. And it is highly likely that this thing is an extraterrestrial spacecraft. Once it approaches, it is unclear whether it will be treated as a threat and subjected to annihilation measures to counterattack. An even more eerie thing followed, and the metal ball emitted a peculiar green glow throughout, resembling an aurora, but it was a color scheme not found on blue stars, and the specific name of this green fluorescence could not be found from the publicly available color chart. According to the radiation instrument data equipped on the ship, the nuclear radiation value in the area near the metal ball has significantly increased. Based on the current distance of 3,000 meters from the metal ball by the inspection team, the radiation value has exceeded the human safety standard of 300 microsieverts, reaching a somewhat astonishing 500 microsieverts. Once the nuclear radiation exceeds 1,000 microsieverts, the body will experience symptoms of nausea, vomiting, and dizziness, and the accumulation of 500 microsieverts for a period of time will also cause serious lesions in the body. The nuclear radiation at a distance of 3,000 meters has already posed a threat to people, and if it gets any closer, the consequences will be unimaginable. The inspection ship also started to consider the long-term plan after retreating enough distance. Some people have put forward the view that an alien spacecraft crashed in the North Pole, and all the aliens inside may have died suddenly. However, some have also raised doubts. If the crash accident, as mentioned by the previous one, is true, with the volume and mass of the spacecraft, why not create an unprecedented mass extinction? It should be noted that a meteorite with a diameter of 1 kilometer collides with a blue star, which is equivalent to 100 million TNT bombs exploding simultaneously. This is still the result of the meteorite being eroded by the atmosphere, and this spacecraft did not experience significant wear and tear when passing through the atmosphere, and there were no obvious impact craters at the point of impact. In theory, a spacecraft with a diameter of 1 kilometer collides without any hesitation, creating high temperatures that are enough to melt most of the Arctic glaciers, and may even lead to an imbalance in the north-south magnetic field of Blue Star, resulting in a magnetic field twist. After a brief and repeated discussion, the final result is that the alien spacecraft did not crash in the North Pole, but landed at a designated location in the North Pole with a purpose. That is to say, there is a high probability that this is an alien invasion event. Just as the inspection team was trembling with fear and reporting intelligence and speculation to the American authorities, an even more terrifying scene emerged. A hole opened on the metal ball, and a large amount of white smoke sprayed out from it. It's smoke. Aliens have released unknown smoke in the Arctic, suspected of poisoning our planet. The first thing that the inspection team thought of was one of the most terrifying methods in biological warfare, gas warfare. Obviously, aliens must have conducted some research on Blue Star humans, specifically developing corresponding viruses based on human genes, and then releasing viruses to eliminate humans. Regarding the field of biochemical research, America has become familiar with it. White smoke quickly approached, and before the inspection ship could escape, it had already filled the hull. Suddenly, a thick layer of frost formed on the ship's hull. It's cold. The members of the inspection team only had time to announce these 3 words, and more than 10 members froze into ice sculptures in an instant, losing their hearts. This freeze is not a quick freeze in the theory of interstellar navigation, but a slow freezing process that destroys cell structures and can be declared dead in biology. This cold wave is moving southward and sweeping across the world. In the closest area to the North Pole, the cold air is unobstructed and rampant. The people in the Big Goose region call themselves the Fighting Nation, and they are born with a strong physique to overcome the extreme cold. Even if they exercise naked outdoors in icy and snowy weather, it is a common occurrence. However, in the face of this crazy cold wave, many outdoor enthusiasts do not even have the opportunity to feel the cold, and are instantly frozen. Through the blocking effect of the Altai Mountains, the cold weather has been weakened, but the driving force to the south is still like a tiger. On the far northern border of the Porcelain Territory, an unprecedented cold wave has invaded, with the border area instantly frozen and temperatures as low as -200 degrees Celsius. As the cold current moves southward, the low temperature is weakened by the high temperature in the southern region and rises slightly. When it reaches the Qinling Mountains, the low temperature remains around -50 degrees Celsius. Faced with this extreme cold climate, uninformed news media reported that the cold wave formed in Siberia. It's not surprising that the media reports casually. After all, the recorded southward cold currents have all come from the Siberian region, where the temperature drops extremely low due to the dry inland air and the lack of insulation from greenhouse gases such as water vapor. The extremely cold situation like this year is truly surprising. According to reports, this year's Siberian cold wave has been extremely rampant, and many villages in the northwest of the Qinling Mountains have unexpectedly fallen into an icy state. Rosen turned on the TV and was immediately exposed to relevant news reports. He switched to several channels, all of which were inserted with this important news. Extreme cold weather. What's the situation? It's still sunny outside here, and people who work outside almost smoke. Rosen, who was hiding indoors with the air conditioning, curled his lips in silence. Besides, it's just past the peak of summer now, and with the increasingly severe greenhouse effect in recent years, how could a cold wave come so quickly? He actually hopes that the cold wave will come soon, so that he won't be troubled by the high electricity bills generated by the air conditioning. The house where Rosen lives is located at the southernmost point of the Porcelain Territory, in the region of 18 degrees north latitude, undoubtedly belonging to the tropical region. It was also due to the lifting of restrictions in the region last year that children of state officials were able to receive a free apartment here. It was only then that Rosen asked his uncle for help and successfully moved in. "No, I have been struggling for 30 years less." In the year Rosen was born, his parents passed away due to unforeseen circumstances. Rosen's uncle had said before he was born that he wanted to recognize this godson, but he never expected Rosen's parents to have an accident. This recognition recognized a legally supported son. Actually, what Rosen's uncle can refuse is that he didn't do it. Rather than bearing the extra cost of raising children, what he is more worried about is that Rosen won't receive the kind treatment he deserves and won't have a healthy environment for physical and mental growth. For this uncle who has deeply considered his future, Rosen also holds great gratitude. In return, he seeks the book garden www.zhaosuiyuan.com. His idea is to live a happy life and not let his uncle worry about him. To prevent possible work-related injuries and disasters, Rosen even started working as a freelance self-media editor, seemingly lying flat. Currently, his monthly salary only supports his daily expenses. It was also because of his godson's identity and complete legal authentication documents that Rosen was able to naturally obtain this 3-bedroom, 1-living-room house. Moreover, this is also a sea view room. From the French window, you can see the sunny beach full of coconut trees, and the endless blue sea. Usually, you can use binoculars to observe the swimsuit beauties on the beach at home. Life can be said to have reached a level that will not be boring. This damn cold weather, I hope it arrives soon. If it weren't for the fear of electricity consumption, would have prepared to keep the refrigerator on for 24 hours. It's over now, there's a cold wave, it's cool. Just as Rosen let out a complaint, the phone dropped by the pillow suddenly rang. Upon seeing the words, Lao Luo, displayed on the call interface, he sat up in shock, his heart racing. Lao Luo is none other than Rosen's uncle. Because Rosen is not up to par, he often criticizes him. Last year, he was also provided with 3,000 yuan per month to support him in finding a job. Unexpectedly, Rosen chose to lie flat and see how angry he was. He often made phone calls and criticized him for not being good. After considering for a while, Rosen finally answered the phone, put the microphone close to his mouth, the receiver away from his ear, and said with a smile, "Uncle, you don't know. Young people nowadays like to lie flat. This is awakening, so don't take decades of detours. You need to avoid taking decades of detours and become a security guard. Have you ever thought about who will take care of you when I'm gone?" Lao Luo first scolded and then said in a deep voice, "Is there a cold current over there?" Chapter 2. Disaster Warning. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Upon hearing no longer the roar of gunfire coming from the earpiece, Rosen brought the earpiece closer to his ear. When I hear the word, cold current, I immediately think of the urgent news that was just broadcasted on various channels, which is about cold current. I haven't come yet. The sun is still shining brightly on my end, but I hope the cold wave comes earlier. I've been a bit tight lately, and I can't afford to pay for the air conditioning and electricity bills, Rosen hinted. Ding dong. At this moment, Rosen's phone rang a beep, and upon seeing it, it turned out that the bank account had received Lao Luo's 10,000 yuan transfer. Rosen's face changed, and his previous carefree demeanor disappeared, replaced by a serious expression. Based on the urgent news broadcast just now, and combined with Lao Luo's sudden transfer of a huge sum of 10,000 yuan to himself, even if he was just fooling around, Rosen realized that the situation was not right, and it was likely to change. You kid, hurry up and hide in the nearby air raid shelter, and wait for notification, okay? I can only transfer you 10,000 yuan for now. Don't spend this money recklessly, you must persist until I come to find you. Do you understand? Lao Luo's tone was dull and even somewhat urgent, completely different from the tone of hatred that never turned into steel in peacetime, which made Rosen unavoidably alert again. Due to his overseas assignment, Lao Luo works in Africa all year round and only goes home once a year. He also meets Rosen and has a New Year's Eve dinner before heading back to Africa. He is a single man with a strong physique, but due to his short stature and being tanned from working in Africa all year round, he still cannot find a wife. Fortunately, having a close godson like Rosen can also be considered as a way to save a wife for his father. This time, he said on the phone that he was going back to China to find Rosen, which made Rosen more alert. It is clear that it is not yet Chinese New Year, and Lao Luo's words contain an undeniable danger signal. Can we say that this cold wave, as the news suggests, is very likely to sweep across the country? No, this is tropical. If a cold current could really sweep over, it's probably not far from the end of global ice cover. Rosen took another look at the bright sun outside the window. Not far away, several little girls in pink swimsuits were lying on the beach sunbathing, exposing their tanned backs to the air. Staying here for a long time, to be honest, the aesthetic aspect will also change, because there are many beautiful women with dark skin nearby, not genetically inherited black, but masterpieces of long-term sunbathing. Lao Luo once joked that if he couldn't get a wife by the age of 45, he had already decided to marry a black girl in Africa. At least the local black girls were more likely to flirt with him as an outsider. Rosen joked at the time that instead of marrying a black girl, it would be better to find a black-skinned partner nearby, at least the children born in the future will not be black ghosts. At that time, Lao Luo made a big fuss and made Rosen see stars in his eyes. It was only after that Rosen realized that Lao Luo's taste had changed. The reason why he did not return to China for development was likely because of love. The inexplicable memories were put away, and when Rosen looked at the beach again, the 3 or 2 dark beauties sunbathing disappeared. According to his usual observation, these girls would not leave until at least 5 p.m. in the afternoon, and it was a bit absurd to leave at only 2 p.m. now. I don't know why, but Rosen felt a cold sensation, not physical skin contact. After all, the air conditioning in the room was not cool enough. This is a kind of inner coldness, always feeling like something bad is about to happen. At this moment, Rosen received a text message from the National Disaster Warning Department on his phone. Due to the dangerous situation of the southward cold current, it is feared that it will sweep across this area. Residents of this area are requested to quickly seek refuge in nearby air raid shelters. The relevant departments will register and provide shelter rooms. Lying trough. What kind of disaster does it require to enter a shelter to avoid danger? Rosen remembers the last typhoon, which claimed to be the strongest typhoon in history with a wind force of 15, but even so, the country did not take any measures to provide shelter. The content of this text message clearly carries a hint of horror, but it does not explicitly state what is going on. Is it possible for a cold current to cause ice cover in the north and freeze tropical areas? If Rosen had only taken it seriously before, then upon receiving this text message, Rosen's face truly became serious. Now it's not just news media concerns, it's not just Lao Luo's concerns, it's also being taken seriously at the national level. Rosen may not trust the judgment of the news media and feel that Lao Luo is being careless but unable to handle the judgment of the country at will. Because every disaster notice issued by the country is carefully considered, it is feared that it may cause public unrest. At this moment, Rosen's phone suddenly sounded a sharp alarm, and in shock, the phone in his hand almost slipped out. This is the alarm sound actively emitted by the built-in alarm app on the phone. This application is connected to the National Emergency Alarm Department in the background, and usually only works in the event of a major disaster. From a young age of over 10, Rosen was the first to hear this application emit an alarm sound. The last straw that crushed the camel fell from the already thoroughly worried state of mind. There's a situation, this is really going to be a big deal. Rosen quickly took the elevator downstairs. Although the elevator may have trapped the people inside due to malfunction in the event of a disaster, he is currently on the 23rd floor, and not taking the elevator is likely to run and break his leg. And because the continuous alarm sound on his phone made him feel extremely nervous, the elevator was actually the fastest way to escape. Even if a cold wave was coming, it could not have arrived so quickly. He wouldn't have immediately sealed the elevator with ice, otherwise he wouldn't need to escape. He just lay on the plane and freeze into an ice sculpture. The elevator descended vertically, and the number of floors displayed on the screen continued to decrease. On the 23rd floor, there was no one intercepting the elevator. This was the first time I had seen this situation, and my nervousness suddenly rose again, giving me the illusion of being abandoned by the world. Until the elevator descended to the first floor and Rosen ran out of the door, his face also turned a bit pale. The community outside the building was completely deserted, as if it were a scene from an empty city in the movie Apocalypse. Without saying a word, Rosen took a shortcut along the path of the green belt and arrived at the roadside outside the community. Standing under the traffic sign, he looked around and saw no one on the entire road. Only a few stray dogs fought fiercely over a little food found in the trash can. Seeing this empty scene, Rosen felt a chill in his heart. He forced himself to calm down, only then did he realize the innate warning ability of animals towards natural disasters. Usually, when extreme disasters are about to occur, some animals will make escape actions in advance through sensing methods such as the Earth's magnetic field. For example, birds flying in the sky will choose to fly at low altitudes, and some birds have a keen response to impending disasters in distant areas, which can easily serve as a basis for judging the impending disaster. At this moment, Rosen looked up at the sky and a group of sparrows were flying low on the nearby green belt. Sparrows have always flown at low altitudes, and there are not many birds flying at high altitudes nearby, which cannot be used as a basis for judgment. It seems that what is said in the textbook may not necessarily work, and even if it does, it is unlikely that one will encounter a situation where it remains unchanged. Hastily glanced at the stray dog grabbing food on the roadside again, and Rosen's pale face finally regained a hint of blood. If stray dogs can still calmly grab food, it indicates that the disaster is not yet approaching. After all, dogs must be more sensitive than me in terms of perception. After calming down, Rosen also realized the possibility of such silence around him, which should be due to the fact that the people had been notified in advance and had moved one step ahead. He then opened the ride-hailing app on his phone and started calling nearby ride-hailing services. Quickly, an empty car was called. When the ride-hailing service was driving towards him, Rosen's heart completely calmed down, and indeed the situation was not as severe as he initially thought. The window of the ride-hailing car rolled down, and the driver wearing sunglasses smiled at the corner of his mouth, saying, "Little brother, haven't you entered the air raid shelter so late? Aren't you the same, strolling outside?" Rosen said with a relaxed expression. The fact that ride-hailing drivers can still operate as usual indicates that it is not yet time for a real crisis. Well, before the disaster arrives, make more money. Who knows if the world will end in the future and if there will be any opportunities to make money. What are you saying? Is money still useful after the end of the world? Rosen had already gotten into the car and said, closing the car door. Who knew? I heard it was an unprecedented extreme cold wave, and perhaps in the future, one would have to spend their whole life in a shelter. They could only rely on the country's supply of goods to survive. Buying goods would also require money. If a real disaster breaks out, as long as order does not collapse, the rich still have a significant say. Rosen pondered the meaning of the driver's older brother, simply put, as long as order does not collapse, the wealthy will still be the older brother. The ride-hailing service left the street where the community was located and drove on a wider road. Rosen's phone in his pocket still rings an alarm, occasionally interspersed with a message urging residents to search for the nearest air raid shelter to hide. Not only Rosen's phone is ringing, but the driver's phone is also ringing, which has seriously affected the prompt sound emitted by the navigation software. It sounds annoying, but I don't know how to turn off the alarm because this application has no interface and there is no option to turn off the service. Rosen decided to switch to the positioning software and check the distance to the nearest air raid shelter. There were still 5 kilometers to go, saying whether it was close or far, which was a matter of walking, running, or taking a ride for more than 10 minutes. At this moment, he suddenly felt a bit cold, and he didn't know if it was due to the air conditioning in the car or something else. He just shivered and a layer of goosebumps appeared on his exposed arm. Is the air conditioning too cold? It's indeed a bit cold. The driver also felt a slight chill, and from the rearview mirror, he saw a layer of goosebumps on Rosen's face. Even if he raised the temperature of the car air conditioning. Previously, he adjusted it to 25 degrees, while the outdoor temperature was 40 degrees. From the temperature difference, 25 degrees feels very cold. Keep raising the temperature to 28 degrees, at which point the obvious cold sensation disappears, and the goosebumps on Rosen's arm slowly disappear. 2 minutes later, Rosen suddenly felt a clear cold sensation again, and goosebumps on his skin resurfaced. Driver, do you think it's still too cold? Chapter 3. Doomsday Shelter System. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The driver frowned and said, "It's already 28 degrees. Even if it feels cold, the driver firmly refuses to increase the temperature, because 28 degrees is the limit of the car air conditioning and cannot be higher. As they approached the destination, the temperature inside the car had already made the two of them shiver coldly. As soon as the car arrived at its destination and broke down, Rosen and the driver immediately got off the car. A cold breath hit Rosen's face, and a layer of white mist formed on the lenses of his glasses. This was a small droplet of water condensed from the warm water vapor on his face when it came into contact with cold air, adhering to the lenses. Little brother, what are you still doing in a daze? This situation is clearly a cold snap. Hurry up and enter the air raid shelter. As soon as the driver got off the car, he rushed towards the air raid shelter. Rosen's speed was noticeably lagging behind, mainly due to the water mist on his glasses obstructing his vision and making it difficult to move. So he took off his myopia glasses and stumbled into the air raid shelter. After entering the air raid shelter, the cold outside suddenly seemed to be isolated, and half of it was removed. Air raid shelters are usually warm in winter and cool in summer. When summer comes, they are often used as summer resorts. The shelters have been transformed into hotels, which can accommodate thousands of people living and dining inside. They also have a complete range of facilities. This is Rosen's first time entering an air raid shelter, and he was not disappointed. As he delved deeper, the goosebumps on Rosen's body gradually disappeared, and the sensory temperature remained at a relatively comfortable level. As we walked further inside, pedestrians began to gather, and the noise was incessant. Some people even became emotionally nervous and loudly discussed topics related to the cold current, causing panic and anxiety for a moment. In the event of a catastrophic disaster, the emotions of the people are easily carried away. Even a trivial piece of gossip can cause group chaos. "Let me take a look at my ID card," the registration staff said to Rosen. Rosen has a habit of carrying his ID card with him, and when he takes it out of the wallet compartment, hands it to the staff. After being arranged by the staff, Rosen was temporarily granted a room of 5 square meters. This room used to be a miscellaneous room, but now it has been urgently vacated. Lao Luo's position among public officials is considered relatively unpopular at the lower level, otherwise he would not have been sent to Africa. Therefore, under Lao Luo's light, Rosen was arranged in the smallest room. Just as Rosen lay contemplating life on the makeshift thin bed, suddenly, a broadcast sounded inside the air raid shelter. Please do not panic, everyone. Scientists from the country are currently studying and discussing the possibility of using artificial weather intervention to restore normal living order during this climate crisis. Everyone will soon return to their original lives. After the broadcast, the noise outside also quieted down, and the work of calming the people's hearts was very successful. If there were any means to intervene in such extreme weather, they would have been taken out long ago. What the radio says can only be listened to, not fully believed. And the artificial weather intervention methods he knows are only limited to small-scale artificial rainfall. Natural disasters like cold waves cannot be prevented by manpower, otherwise the annual food production crisis can be avoided. In 3 days, this rumor was exposed without any evidence. The outside of the air raid shelter has been engulfed in ice and snow. The outdoor temperature drops to around -20 degrees Celsius, and spitting phlegm on the ground can freeze into ice lumps in a few seconds. As for the inside of the air raid shelter, people also slightly sense the cold, with a perceived temperature of around 15 degrees. Despite the presence of heating facilities inside the shelter, the temperature remained at only 15 degrees Celsius. Of course, it is not ruled out that the heating power may be reduced in order to save energy. In short, the cold on the surface of the body can already be clearly felt inside the air raid shelter. This extremely cold weather is the first time it has been seen in tropical regions, and it was something people couldn't even imagine in the past. The weather has cooled down, and the noisy people have also passively calmed down. Occasionally, people gather to discuss the extremely cold weather outside, and there is no longer any noisy situation. A few more days have passed, and the outdoor temperature has reached -30 degrees Celsius. The temperature has dropped in recent days, and we can clearly feel the drop every day. It's getting cooler day by day, and the perceived temperature inside the air raid shelter has dropped to around 10 degrees. Fewer people gathered outside the room to discuss. Most of them wrapped their bodies into zongzi with quilts and huddled in the corner shivering. Rosen is no exception, clearly feeling a decrease in the amount of food allocated each day, severe calorie loss, and an increasing sense of hunger in his stomach. However, it has already reached the first month of global ice cover, and the hottest tropical regions in the world have reached temperatures as high as -10 degrees Celsius, which is still located in a certain location in the Pacific Ocean. Due to the obstruction of cold currents by the tropical marine climate, the temperature has barely risen. Facing this global cold wave is just a drop in the bucket. Due to extreme cold, the communication lines in most areas have long been frozen out, causing communication interruptions. In addition to the self-operated systems inside the air raid shelters that can still provide electricity, the outside world has been covered in ice and snow, completely disconnecting from the world. The shelter seems like a ship drifting in the vast ocean, lonely and helpless. The people inside the air raid shelter are not aware of the situation outside, they only know that it is icy and snowy outside. As long as people leave the shelter without protective measures, they will freeze into ice sculptures in just 1 or 2 minutes. Therefore, no one dared to leave the air raid shelter without authorization, and they obediently wrapped themselves in blankets in the room. Until the convoys transporting supplies outside no longer appeared, the food inside the air raid shelter ran out, and hungry people could only wear thick thermal protective clothing to search for food. It was then that the people inside the air raid shelter first saw the world outside, which was sealed in ice and snow. The streets were covered in white snow, and pedestrians without protective clothing were frozen into monuments. The owner and his family, who couldn't escape in time at the roadside convenience store, huddled together on a bed. The 3 of them were permanently sealed off, and the car windows on the street were cracked with cold. The cruel realities that come to mind one after another have brought great inner shock to those who go out searching for food. What is truly terrifying is often not these easily visible things, but the extremely terrifying predators hidden in the snow. A small team searching for food noticed movement behind the cover, thinking there were survivors. However, they saw a terrifying scene that they would never forget for a lifetime. A humanoid monster with a peculiar appearance and covered in snow-white scales. Its arms are the heads of 2 giant lizards, and on its dark and fluffy head, there are actually 18 compound eyes arranged, with 2 rows of sharp teeth growing under the eyes. The sound I just heard was that this monster was gnawing on frozen human corpses, and their heads were all crushed. I didn't understand what the monster in front of me was, but the people searching for food were so scared that only 2 out of a dozen people managed to escape alive, claiming that a terrifying alien, a combination of lizards and spiders, had appeared outside. People initially didn't believe it, but as time passed, the existence of aliens outside no longer became a secret. The doors of the air raid shelters have also been closed for a longer period of time, only opening once a month for people to go out and search for food. A few days later, people finally realized that the only survivors in the world today are probably humans hiding in air raid shelters. Starting to refer to this era of human civilization turning point as the Global Ice Age, renaming the hidden air raid shelters as shelters. It was also on the day when the air raid shelter was renamed as a shelter. A loud electronic sound rang out in Rosen's mind. The shelter system has been successfully activated. At first, Rosen didn't pay attention and thought it was an outside broadcast. But soon, he realized that he had something extra in his mind. Name: Doomsday Shelter System, currently unlocking the Technology Tree node. Shelter. Current upgrade points. 0, for every member recruited to the shelter, an additional 100 upgrade points will be added per day. Current number of members. 1. Member list. Rosen, shelter leader. Only people who consistently lie flat and become gods are suitable as leaders. Inertia makes people better at using their brains, and this person is very good. Upon seeing the extra things in his mind, Rosen was stunned on the spot, suspecting whether his brain had frozen out and had hallucinations. But as his mind moved, the next moment he unexpectedly entered a space of only 10 square meters. This space is empty, except that the ground is paved with 10 bricks per square meter. As for the darker areas further away, there are air walls blocking it, making it difficult to pass through. At first, Rosen thought he had hallucinations and was thinking about how to regain consciousness when he returned to a 5 square meter room. Just now, a system claiming to be a apocalyptic shelter bound me, and this is not an illusion. Rosen was overjoyed. When he teleported into the shelter space just now, he could clearly feel that the temperature in that space was not only not cold, but also very suitable for living. At least stay in the shelter space, without having to sleep in bed every day and feel so cold that it shivers. With a thought, Rosen teleported again into the shelter space. This time he carefully inspected the space. The shelter was indeed empty, but the bricks on the ground would light up as he stepped on it. Upon careful study, it was discovered that an option popped up on the brick. Construction. Suddenly, an interface popped up in front of me, displaying various facilities available for construction. Name: 1 square meter ground. Description: options for expanding shelters. Consumption: 100 upgrade points, unlocking next-level technology tree nodes. Red brick floors, ceramic tiles floors, wooden tiles, tiled floors. Name: basic canteen. Description: place where food is provided. Consumption: 200 upgrade points. Area: 0 square meters, unlock the next level of technology tree nodes. Kitchenware, recipes, cafeteria appliances. Name: barracks. Description: a place to summon and train parallel world armies. Consumption: 1000 upgrade points. Area: 0 square meters, unlock next level technology tree nodes. Combat equipment, tactics. With the study of this shelter space, Lawson also discovered some settings of the shelter system at zhaozuiyuan.com. As long as enough people are recruited to join the shelter, the more upgrade points can be obtained every day, and various facilities can be upgraded faster. And the shelter system has a technology tree, which is its focus. The technology tree allows Rosen to use upgrade points to upgrade nodes, unlock more subordinate nodes, and continuously upgrade to unlock a lush technology tree in the shelter. In theory, this shelter can continuously upgrade and grow, forming a vast area, and may even form a country with a will form. After all, the shelter system has the function of building barracks, which can summon troops from the barracks. Rosen quickly realized that as long as he had enough time, he could use this system to create a vast world beyond the country. And I am like the creator god of this world. Chapter 4. Food Crisis. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push. Soon, Rosen also found that his upgrade point balance was 0. According to the system description, he could only obtain 100 upgrade points the next day, which is calculated based on the number of people joining the shelter. At present, there is only one member in the shelter, who can earn 100 upgrade points every day. It takes a lot of time to upgrade this unknown shelter. I definitely can't bring strangers into the shelter casually. Exposing the shelter in the apocalypse will bring me a lot of trouble, and some people may even think of killing me and exposing the shelter. Leaving aside the possibility of breaking out of the shelter, from a human perspective, it cannot withstand the test. In this increasingly harsh living environment, people are extremely hungry and anything they can do is possible, so Rosen has to guard against it. The next moment, he thought of his uncle Lao Luo. Lao Luo asked him to hide in the air raid shelter as soon as possible, and he did it. However, he had agreed to come and pick him up. It had been a month and Lao Luo had not been seen yet. Presumably, in the face of global ice, Lao Luo has either been frozen into a monument or hidden in one of the air raid shelters. Rosen hopes he is still alive, even if he may face a more brutal future. Now Rosen has less than 5,000 yuan left in his payment account, and the food issue often makes him worried. Lao Luo instructed him to save the 10,000 yuan, but now this situation is not a matter of whether he wants to save or not, he has no choice at all. When the country used to transport materials to air raid shelters, prices remained at a relatively normal level. Even considering that some elderly people did not know how to use electronic devices and forgot to bring cash when going out, air raid personnel would provide free food. Since the material transportation team stopped delivering materials to the air raid shelter, the price level has been increasing day by day. So far, the price of a single piece of bread packaged separately has reached an astonishing 100 yuan. Starting a few days ago, Rosen only bought one piece of bread and fruit belly a day, really spending a huge amount to save money. If Lao Luo doesn't appear again, he may see a skinny nephew or a rotten and smelly corpse. Of course, Rosen had also called Lao Luo more than once. In the first few days of the apocalypse, communication had not been interrupted, and the two of them had relatively smooth communication. However, on the 5th day of the apocalypse, Lao Luo's phone could no longer be reached, and the next day, news came of the communication line freezing. There are various speculations about this cold wave, and it is widely believed that it should not be a simple cold wave. According to intelligence leaked by people searching for food outside, the air outside is constantly filled with an extremely cold white mist from the north, constantly washing on the insulation and protective clothing, seriously affecting the visibility. The usual cold current does not wash away the ice and snow from distant snow to such a distant location, even if the wind is strong enough to face a warm southern cyclone, it has already melted. Rosen has also speculated that if it were not the cold current formed in Siberia, the more likely source would be the Arctic region further north. There must have been some unexpected events that triggered this disaster there, but speculating on the specific cause is meaningless. We can only wait for scientists to take action and go north to investigate the root cause of the disaster. The creaking sound of the dining car on the cold ground outside the room penetrated into the already small room, and soon Rosen heard a knock on the door. Mineral water, bread, ham sausages, pre-made vegetable buns. Do you want them? The sound outside trembled, and you could feel that she was very cold. She endured a low temperature of 5 degrees and pushed a dining cart to deliver them from door to door. Ordinary people would turn cold into dogs. Yes, until today, the room temperature outside has dropped to 5 degrees, which is still under normal operation of the insulation facilities in the shelter. Rosen wrapped himself in a thick cotton quilt, and the breath he exhaled immediately turned into mist. The insulation effect in the cramped 5-square-meter room was much better, but it was only 2 or 3 degrees higher than outside. At the moment the door opened, a chilling chill invaded, and the cold hair on Rosen's cheek stood erect as if it had been electrocuted. Outside, she saw an elderly woman with a flushed face and several coats wrapped around her, pushing a food cart filled with food. At present, the order inside the shelter is not yet in a state of collapse. In order to maintain surface order, the leader of the shelter arranges for staff to deliver food door to door, which can also stabilize these refugees. But Lawson knew that this state of order could not be maintained for too long, and as fewer and fewer people went out to search for food, food would become an irreconcilable contradiction. For thousands of years, when the food crisis led to the downfall of the dynasty, historical records often record related events. "Give me a piece of bread," Rosen said. "Here, it's $200 in total." During their conversation, white mist shrouded between them. Why has the price increased again? If it continues to rise, no one will be able to afford it. Rosen was very worried that he wouldn't be able to live long like this, and his savings of less than 5,000 yuan might not last for a month. Will Lao Luo come to pick him up within this month? Whether Lao Luo is still alive or not, Rosen can no longer be certain. Although he firmly believes that Lao Luo is still very safe in his heart, it is just that the two cannot contact each other due to communication problems, but he cannot be 100% sure in his heart. Under the apocalypse, death is the most normal phenomenon, and there are many people on the streets who have been directly frozen into ice sculptures. It is said that those who were unable to wear protective clothing at the beginning were immediately eroded into frozen meat by white mist. Not to mention the extremely cold-resistant extraterrestrial creatures outside, which seriously threaten the safety of those searching for food. Even if Lao Luo wants to come over, he will have to go through a narrow escape. It is impossible not to peel off a layer of skin. You also know that there are cannibalistic monsters outside, and very few of us who go out to search for food have returned, bringing back even less food. If we still sell you at that price, those who can really afford the high price will definitely starve to death. Upon hearing Auntie's words, Rosen glanced at the food on the dining car again. She knocked on many doors and found that there were not many people who truly chose to buy food. Most people were lying flat before the end of the day, and their wallets had not yet been as swollen as Rosen's. They had already spent all their savings a few days ago. After all, many young people nowadays are moonlight people, and it cannot be blamed that they cannot save money. It can only be said that society needs to stimulate consumption, and the poor happen to be the main force of consumption. Rosen couldn't help but consider another question: as the pace of the apocalypse continues to advance, the problem of food shortages will also become increasingly prominent. Shouldn't those truly wealthy people buy all their food in advance? There are those wealthy people who are rushing to grab food at high prices. Where can food still be compared to ordinary people? The reason can only be that the senior management of the shelter intervened from it. The senior management has a brain and knows that the intervention of the wealthy will lead to conflicts within the shelter in advance. Therefore, restrictions have been placed on the quantity of food purchases, with each person only able to buy a maximum of 2 pieces of bread per day. As for the more expensive pre-made vegetable bags, they were widely criticized and deemed unhealthy before the end of the day, and restaurants were strongly condemned for using pre-made vegetables for profit. In the apocalyptic environment, pre-made dishes have become a delicacy because they do not require additional energy to cook, and can be eaten with already prepared dishes, which is already commendable. The price will only be higher, and the increase in price is beyond most people's imagination. At present, only wealthy people can eat pre-made vegetables, and they still use property certificates as collateral to seize them. It can only be said that the world of the rich is beyond imagination. If it were for Rosen himself, he would rather eat bread that is frozen and hard than spend a lot of money on pre-made dishes. No one has been able to come forward with a sustainable development plan for the food issue in the past month. And currently being able to see food on the dining car is already a form of spiritual comfort. Even if one cannot eat it, there will be no panic about the shelter being destroyed. Leaving people a little hope, coupled with hunger, can encourage those hiding in the room to join the food search queue, forming a virtuous cycle. If you can't afford it, I suggest you join the search team and go out to search for food once a month. As long as you can come back alive, the food for that month can be provided for free. What Ant said next confirmed Rosen's speculation. Under the temptation of pressure and benefits, 90% of people choose to go out and search for food. No, I still have some money. 200 is enough, but give me 2 pieces of bread. Rosen took out $400 from his pocket and handed it to his aunt. He also took an extra piece of dry and hard frozen bread from the dining car. Where did he get the banknotes on his body? A few days before the end of the world, senior officials at the shelter encouraged everyone to exchange the amounts in their payment accounts for paper currency. Obviously, the senior management has gained more information about this catastrophic disaster, and a complete set of reasonable arrangements has been conceived in advance. If we hadn't encouraged everyone to exchange paper currency at the beginning, who else would be able to afford food now? How can I prove how much deposit I have based on the page that cannot be refreshed on my phone? Aunt clearly didn't understand Rosen's reaction and looked surprised. She turned around and pushed the dining cart towards the next room. I can't wait for the slim possibility. From now on, let's just assume that Lao Luo won't come to me. After closing the door, Rosen's face turned deathly gray. Yesterday's bread was only a piece of $100, but it has doubled in the past night. It is not unlikely that tomorrow's bread will quadruple its price. Rosen likes to lie flat, but once the environment seriously threatens his lying time, he cannot sit idly by and can only seek help from the suddenly awakened shelter system now. Entering the 10-square-meter shelter located on different planes again, Rosen focused on researching food-related content on the technology tree. It was only then that I realized that in order to obtain food from this shelter, it was necessary to upgrade the relevant buildings and equipment. It is divided into 2 parts. One is related to food ingredient production, and the other is technology in processing food ingredients. Even if ingredients are not cooked, in most cases they can be eaten directly, and Rosen's priority is still related to ingredient production. Greenhouses are the infrastructure for vegetable production. In order to have access to delicious dishes from various cuisines in the future, it is inevitable to upgrade to greenhouses. Even so, even if it's upgraded to a greenhouse without vegetable seeds, it's not possible. The saying goes that a clever woman cannot cook without rice. The production of seeds comes from the study of plant genes, using a certain science fiction product called a seed culture dish. At present, human scientific level is not sufficient to achieve the process from genes to seeds. Rosen is not surprised that this shelter system can provide future technological power. The system itself is puzzling, and it can only be speculated that it is the scientific research achievements of future people. It was only in the pre-apocalyptic period that he was found as the host. In this way, it is likely that in the future, the secret of time travel will be revealed before the system can be transmitted. Of course, Rosen is not sure about the specific situation. He can only try to learn more information in the future by constantly interpreting the technology tree provided on the system. Upgrading to a greenhouse requires 100 upgrade points, and seed culture dishes require 100 upgrade points. Even if no fertilizer is needed, simply installing drip irrigation lines would require 300 upgrade points. After reviewing the relevant content, Rosen's brow furrowed again. Judging from the current rate of earning 100 upgrade points per day, at least he had to wait for 5 days to barely plant vegetables. If we don't consider installing drip irrigation facilities, it will take 2 days to plant vegetables. At that time, we can only trouble to manually water with a bucket. Of course, vegetable genetic materials cannot be lacking, and extracting genes is also a problem. Nowadays, the world is frozen, and the vegetation outside is estimated to be tightly sealed. Digging them out is also a thankless task. It is estimated that no one wants to do such foolish things for no reason, as there is still a threat from extraterrestrial life outside. The genetic material of vegetables is crucial, and Rosen must have found a way to have others help him get it. For safety reasons, he cannot go out in person, otherwise he would have had bad luck and died outside, not only for himself and Lao Luo, but also for all humanity. If this apocalyptic shelter system develops, it will be enough to bring hope to all humanity. Having a system is very important, even more important than he thinks, and the future of all humanity depends on him. Adventures and other things, it's not necessary to do them, it's better not to do them. Tossing the second piece of bread in his hand, Rosen had originally planned to use it as food for tomorrow, but now he plans to use it as bait and hire and search team members to assist him. Coincidentally, the male owner of the neighboring Lao Wang family is a member of the search team, and because he is a neighbor, he usually says a few words. He should be able to find the Shuyuan website www.zhaoshuyuan.com to speak. Dad, Xuanxuan's stomach is so hungry. Xian wants to eat bread, but her stomach hurts. Before Rosen could knock on the door, he heard the cries of a little girl coming from inside. Xian, we don't have much money at home anymore. We must save our food, the woman's voice said in a low voice. The man sighed and said, I'm starving. Give Xian my portion for tomorrow. So what are you going to eat tomorrow? How about sharing my portion with you tomorrow? No need, wife. You can keep it for yourself. I joined the search team, and if possible, I'll steal some food when I go out searching tomorrow. The man gritted his teeth as if he had made an indescribable decision. At this moment, Rosen knocked on the door. The man inside opened the door and saw that the person outside was Lawson, wrapped in a cotton quilt. He quickly took a path and said, Xiao Luo, come in. Rosen walked in without hesitation and helped close the door, feeling less cold. Uncle Wang, I know you are from the search team. I would like to ask for your help. I don't mind this piece of bread, so I'll give it to you, said the doorstep. Rosen placed the cold and hard bread on the table, and the 3 people in the room stared at it, swallowing their saliva. They were all starving and ate a piece of bread every day. Who could hold on? I need your help to collect the stems, leaves, or roots of vegetables, as long as they are removed from the vegetables. The more, the better. If it's sweet potatoes or potatoes, that would be even better. Rosen tried to describe his intention as much as possible. Especially sweet potatoes and potatoes, which were the most important food for the people during the outbreak of war, have the advantages of easy cultivation, high yield, storage resistance, and simple cooking, and their nutritional and energy content is no less than other types of vegetables. Chapter 5. Biotechnology, Seed Culture Dishes. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, what do you need to collect vegetables' roots, stems, and leaves for? It's not easier to swallow than bread, nor is it resistant to hunger, and you know the situation outside. The vegetation outside is frozen, making it difficult to find. Glancing at the bread on the table again, old Wang swallowed his saliva. Their family really wanted to get this piece of bread, but Rosen's request was a bit difficult. You should know that going out to search for food is also an organized activity, even if you steal it behind someone else's back, it requires skills. Leaving most teams to search for the roots, stems, and leaves of vegetables will be discovered immediately. Leaving aside these things, if we encounter extraterrestrial creatures alone outside, we don't know how they would die. Dad, I want to eat bread, I'm hungry. Wang Xianxian grabbed old Wang's arm and shook it, crying. A little girl under 8 years old, her resistance to hunger is too weak. Okay, I promise you, but I can't guarantee that I'll find the vegetables. I can only help you keep an eye out. Old Wang looked at Rosen with uncertainty, and then his gaze fell on his daughter, sighing helplessly. Okay, but I can only give you 1 week at most. I can't hold on for too long. After obtaining Rosen's consent, Lao Luo handed the bread on the table to Xianxian. Xianxian held the bread and opened the packaging in the corner, nibbling on it. Xuanxuan's mother saw this scene with a mournful expression on her face. Lao Wang's family is all kind people. If someone else were to choose to snatch the bread or pretend to agree, it wouldn't be a big deal. After being neighbors with Lao Wang for so long, Rosen has a good understanding of him. In the future, the shelter needs to recruit refugees, and the Lao Wang family can become the first group of people. Farewell to the old Wang family. Rosen returned to his room, and by 8 o'clock the next morning, he observed that his system account had an additional 100 upgrade points. At noon, taking advantage of the most abundant sunshine, the temperature outside the shelter rises to the highest temperature of the day, -5 degrees, which is also the best time for the search team to go out and search for supplies. In past searches, they have found that the vitality of those extremely cold-resistant alien creatures will also decrease as the temperature rises. Originally, extraterrestrial creatures that could escape tens of meters in an instant at -30 degrees Celsius, their speed dropped to only 8 meters per second in an environment of -5 degrees Celsius. Faced with extraterrestrial creatures at this speed, some people in the search team who usually exercise can barely escape from the pursuit of extraterrestrial creatures. It is difficult to explain the anomalous characteristics of extraterrestrial organisms at temperature using modern human scientific knowledge. As is well known, cell viability is related to temperature. When the temperature rises within an appropriate range, cell viability will be enhanced, mainly because biological enzymes are more active when the temperature increases. As a result, the body's athletic ability will also be improved. But this extreme cold-resistant extraterrestrial creature is the opposite, with lower temperatures and faster movement, just like this extreme cold crisis outside is specifically prepared for these extraterrestrial creatures. Some people have raised this viewpoint earlier, suspecting that Cold Current is a masterpiece of aliens. Watching the search team open the door of the air raid shelter and leave to search for food, Rosen also began his first day of waiting. He had previously consulted the relevant content of the system, and as long as he successfully developed seeds from vegetable genes and planted them in greenhouses, he could use biotechnology to develop a high-yield nutrient solution to accelerate vegetable growth and increase yield. Growth rate nutrient solution and seed culture dish are both technological forces that currently do not exist in humans, and belong to the branch node of biotechnology on the technology tree. Literally, he can only know that this nutrient solution can accelerate the growth cycle of vegetables, but the specific effect it can accelerate is unknown. That is to say, there is still a gambling element in it. Using sweet potatoes as a reference target, they only start growing at temperatures above 15 degrees Celsius and can grow normally at 18 degrees Celsius. The growth cycle for spring planting is generally 160 to 200 days, while for summer planting, the growth cycle is around 110 to 120 days. The greenhouse can simulate the environment of summer sowing, which means that it can harvest edible sweet potatoes no later than 120 days. If the addition of nutrient solution can accelerate the growth rate by about 6 times, then it can harvest the first batch of edible sweet potatoes in less than a month. Even if you don't have enough money to buy food by then, you don't worry about starving or freezing to death. Of course, this is the best-case scenario, and it's hard for Rosen to expect a technology he doesn't have any knowledge of to truly achieve 6 times acceleration. If I could only accelerate 3 times, I'm afraid I might not have reached the ripe fruit yet and have starved to death in the room. Anyway, this method is already his last resort, and he must seize this opportunity to save his life. Just wait until the search team where old Wang is located returns to their territory. It can be seen that the number of people returning from the search team is less than 300, which accounts for less than 4/5 of the total number of people traveling. Even if they go out for a short period of time when extraterrestrial life is relatively inactive, there is still a lot of danger. What a pity, you know what? Just now I saw tons of Nutrient Express on a truck. I wanted to go and move a box, but there are extraterrestrial creatures near that truck, and I dare not approach it. Do you remember the location of the truck? Next time, let's find an opportunity to move back a few more boxes. Nutritional Express, I feel like I haven't tasted this kind of delicious food in years. The search team that came back was talking about food topics, and those who didn't go out were drooling, which further strengthened the idea of exploring outside. You should know that once you join the search team, even if you return empty-handed, you won't be hungry. The organization will ensure that every member receives food. Rosen also wiped the saliva at the corner of his mouth. The sour and sweet taste of Nutritional Express easily stimulated saliva secretion when he remembered it. Moreover, less than a month after the end of the year, Rosen felt like he hadn't had enough to drink for a whole year, and he regretted not showing off a few more drinks before the end of the year. How about it, is it wired? Rosen found the injured old Wang returning from the crowd and asked. He was injured on his right arm and wrapped it with fragments of clothing, exuding a crimson hue. A piece of fabric was missing from the corner of the clothes, and blood was also scattered on the clothes. It was obvious that they had encountered an alien creature and luckily escaped alive. Old Wang shook his head in confusion. This outing may have had a great impact on his soul, and the feeling of walking through the gates of hell changed his temperament. After nodding to Rosen, he immediately returned to his room. There were worried conversations from the Wang family in the room, and Lawson also heard the Wang family's 8-year-old daughter Xian crying. After explaining to his family that he was okay, old Wang left the room again and came to Rosen, showing him a green stem and leaf the size of a thumb. Rosen reached out to get it, but quickly protected the small piece of rhizome in his palm, which Rosen couldn't reach. Lao Wang, what do you mean by this? I didn't originally want to give it to you. In order to save this useless thing, I almost died. How can you make up for my loss, kid? Old Wang's gaze was like a hungry wolf staring at his prey. After experiencing life and death, he realized that although the promise was important, it was also important to measure the price given by others. A piece of bread was not enough to make up for the damage he suffered in searching for it this time. Rosen took out a piece of bread he had just bought from the dining car from his pocket and threw it into old Wang's hand. He also saw that old Wang's injury was not light, and it was not worth it just for a piece of bread. Although the price is high now, a piece of bread is still high enough to cover the cost of treatment. Although it can still be considered a skin wound, it can heal even with rough treatment without seeking medical attention. Everyone took a step back. After Lao Wang took a piece of bread, he stopped asking for it. Otherwise, the last piece of bread in Rosen's pocket would probably not be saved and he would have to go hungry today. After obtaining green stems and leaves from old Wang, Rosen couldn't wait to return to the room, lock the door, and then teleport his thoughts into the shelter space. Consume 100 upgrade points and successfully unlock the seed culture dish. A flash of light flashed past, and in front of Rosen's eyes appeared a basin-sized basin and bowl device, weighing about 30 pounds and heavy to the touch. It was all bronze-colored and judged to be a metal product based on touch, but there was no charging port on it, and it was unclear where the energy needed for its operation came from. There is only a bright and large button on the lid, open. Rosen pressed the open button with his index finger, and the lid of the petri dish slowly popped open, revealing a circular groove the size of a basin. According to the prompt that popped up on the culture dish, Rosen placed half a finger-long green stem and leaf into the container, and then pressed to close the lid. He cannot yet determine whether this small cut of stem and leaf really comes from the sweet potato plant, as it has already frozen, and even if it appears green, he cannot determine the details. As the instrument cover closes, the indicator light on the casing flashes like a running marquee, and a magnetic prompt sound is emitted. Dissolving plant tissue. Starting to strip genes from tissue cells. Genetic analysis. Successfully analyzed, it is a perennial herbaceous vine sweet potato in the family Convolvulaceae, belonging to the genus Cassava. The original product is South America and the Greater and Lesser Andreas Islands. It is now widely distributed in tropical and subtropical regions, and also grows in some northern regions. Reshaping seeds based on genes, please wait. Successfully reshaped and obtained sweet potato seeds, X1000 seeds. Those who have planted sweet potatoes in rural areas know that sweet potatoes actually do not have real seeds, only fruits, which can be used as seeds for planting. However, sweet potato stems and leaves are usually used for oblique planting, so the common planting method for sweet potatoes is cutting. This is still Rosen's first time seeing the seeds of sweet potatoes, which is clearly inconsistent with the reality. Can sweet potatoes also have true seeds? Strange, so strange. Can this petri dish instrument analyze any input plant and develop corresponding seeds? That is to say, even plants without seeds can analyze and produce seeds. Rosen couldn't help but speculate. It should be noted that the significance of seeds lies in storage. Some plants mature their fruits in autumn, and in order to ensure the safety of their offspring during the winter, they have evolved this form of seeds. Some crop seeds even have an increased germination rate after winter, such as rice seeds. Looking at the pot full of sweet potato seeds after opening the lid, each about the size of a nail cap, Rosen couldn't help but check to determine whether the seed type belonged to monocotyledonous or dicotyledonous. Common dicotyledonous seeds consist of 2 cotyledons and an embryo, and the embryo is underdeveloped. The seed size is relatively small, making it easy to increase germination rate through seed awakening. In contrast, the endosperm development of monocotyledonous plants is larger, the seed coat is more sturdy, and the significance of seed awakening operation is not significant. Although the sweet potato seeds cultivated in a petri dish are the size of nail caps, twice the size of monocotyledonous corn seeds, in fact, when you open one, you can find that it is a dicotyledonous seed with a skin as thin as a peanut skin and cicada wings, which is also a type that is easy to awaken. The traditional way to wake up is to take out a wash basin, lay a soaked towel flat inside, lay a layer of seeds flat, and then lay another layer of soaked towel. Then, place the wash basin in a dark and ventilated corner, observe the evaporation of towel water every day, use a spray bottle to wet the towel, and ensure that the environment is moist. After 6 to 8 hours, most of the dicotyledonous seeds have already begun to sprout. Now the room temperature around him is only in single digits, making it difficult for the seeds to sprout, and they can only be awakened in the shelter space. Rosen had 1,000 seeds on hand, which could be separated into 3 wash basins to awaken the seeds. Coincidentally, his room was renovated from a miscellaneous room, and there were several wash basins and wet towels under the bed that he had moved out. After wetting the towel, place the sweet potato seeds between 2 layers of wet towels for seed awakening treatment. By doing so, it can at least improve the survival rate compared to direct planting. The next step is a more important step, which is to upgrade the greenhouse in the shelter space. Name: Greenhouse. Description: environmental maintenance device for growing crops, consumption. 100 upgrade points, occupation. 0 square meters, unlock next level technology nodes. Dropper technology, dropper equipment, greenhouse Internet of Things system. The greenhouse belongs to a branch of the agricultural node under the shelter node in the technology tree. The branch under the shelter node is unlocked by default. After unlocking biotechnology, many options in the agricultural node have also been unlocked. The basis for unlocking seems to be the consumption of upgrade points. For example, if he has accumulated 200 upgrade points, many branches have been unlocked on the technology tree. These unlocked branches can be used in the short term, but there is no direct relationship between them. It is likely that they are unlocked with the total consumption of upgrade points. That is to say, in order to unlock more branches, he must consume enough upgrade points. What surprised Rosen was that the greenhouse didn't take up any space. Was it a folded space? With a sudden thought, Rosen switched to another space, which took up 1 acre of space and was indeed independent of the shelter. The surface conditions were black soil for cultivation, which was the kind of land where animals and plants had decayed and precipitated for thousands of years to form humus and organic matter. The soil of zhaoshuyuan.com shows a clear black color. How can such a large area be unlocked with only 100 upgrade points? The price for unlocking 1 square meter in the shelter is 100 upgrade points. At first, I was a bit surprised, but soon I realized that shelters can be used to accommodate people, while greenhouses can only be used to grow vegetables. Of course, it is possible to have people live in greenhouses when absolutely necessary, but there are no upgraded facilities available for living in the greenhouses, and one can only build the most basic wooden houses themselves, with low living conditions. In the following time, Rosen frequently observed the moisture level of the towel on the basin and was ready to re-moisten the towel at any time. A day passed, and Rosen scooped water with his hands halfway through, sprinkled a lot of water, and increased the humidity in the basin. Finally, during the morning inspection, he found that under the towel, there were already densely packed root systems. More precisely, it is a capillary root. After the sweet potato seed sprouted, the main root had already broken through and was half a centimeter thick, intertwined and difficult to separate. Some even penetrated through towels, demonstrating the strong vitality. But Rosen still carefully separated the sprouted seeds from the towel, fearing that these hopes of survival would be lost. You have to rely on these seeds to know if you can afford food in the future. The sprouted seeds are collected directly in one of the pots, and after counting, 100 seeds are in a motionless state, without sprouting, and even a dozen or so directly rot, or the sprouts emitted are directly rotten. Rosen will place intact seeds that have not sprouted separately in a wash basin to continue planting, while the seeds that have successfully sprouted will be prepared to be planted in a greenhouse. It seems like I'm one step closer to harvesting my first batch of sweet potato food. Chapter 6. Water Resources Issues, Pumping Stations. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, the next step is to plant these successfully sprouted seeds in a greenhouse. Rosen entered the greenhouse holding a basin filled with sprouted seeds. First, he checked the soil moisture and dug a pit on the black soil with his bare hands. Based on the feeling of moisture in his hands and the amount of soil particles attached to his hands, it was determined that there was insufficient moisture in the soil. If he did not water the seedlings after sowing, they would quickly wither in the ground. As soon as he placed the basin on the ground of the greenhouse, Rosen returned to the shelter outside and took out 2 large iron buckets from under the bed in the room. He left the room carrying the buckets and walked towards the depths of the shelter. There is a faucet inside the shelter, and a water storage tank is connected to the back. The water in the storage tank comes from the underground well outside the air raid shelter. In today's globally frozen environment, only groundwater can remain liquid. Most of the liquid that remains exposed on the surface has frozen, and even the sewage treatment tanks of water plants are frozen. It is impossible to expect to use tap water under such circumstances. Holding a large iron bucket in both hands, Rosen couldn't wrap himself in bedding and was only wearing the cotton jacket distributed by the shelter at the beginning, feeling extremely cold. He sneezed heavily and arrived at the water supply room deep in the air raid shelter. The temperature here was about 2 degrees higher, but it still felt very cold. There was a row of sinks inside, with 15 faucets arranged on top, which was enough to provide water for the entire air raid shelter. The water source is a necessary resource for survival, and the senior management of the shelter has arranged 2 staff members to guard the water supply room, strictly controlling the amount of water received by the refugee gate each time. At present, although water resources are not a problem, it is important to know that people can skip food and replenish water. When the water runs out, how can the people inside survive? At that time, we can only arrange for people to excavate ice blocks outside and transport them into the shelter. Not only is it troublesome, but the melting of the ice blocks takes away heat, increasing the burden on the insulation facilities inside the shelter and accelerating energy consumption. One issue we have to consider is that going out to collect ice blocks will face the threat of extraterrestrial creatures, which is equivalent to being exposed to those monsters in public. But now the main energy source inside the air raid shelter is still electricity. The power plants outside have long been on strike, and even if they can operate, current cannot be transmitted through the frozen transmission lines. The air raid mainly relies on the 5 old-fashioned diesel generators inside to maintain insulation and light up bulbs. Faced with the disaster of internal cooling, the daily consumption of diesel by the 5 diesel generators is barely the same, adding an additional energy burden, which will only cause the internal temperature to drop again. People will spend more energy on keeping warm, feel even hungry, and affect their ability to search for food and escape danger, leading to a series of more problems. Every time the search team goes out to search for supplies, the essential resource they must find is diesel. Some people can go hungry, but without diesel, the hunger problem caused by insufficient power generation will be greatly enhanced. The diesel generator inside the air raid shelter has a power of 10 kilowatts, and when operating, it consumes 2.5 liters of diesel per hour. It requires 60 liters of diesel per 24 hours a day, and the consumption of 5 diesel generators for a whole day is 300 liters of diesel. In fact, the air defense shelter is equipped with a storage room, and the excess electrical energy is stored in the battery. The generator does not actually operate non-stop 24 hours a day, but rather artificially controls the working hours of the generator under the condition of recycling and storing electrical energy. Nevertheless, the 5 generators consume nearly 50 liters of diesel per day. Therefore, what appears to be a simple water scarcity problem may bring a series of crises, which are not as simple as they seem on the surface. When Rosen entered the water collection room, the 2 large buckets he was clearly carrying caught the attention of the 2 staff members inside, and he couldn't help but take 2 more glances. Rosen sensed a hint of vigilance in their eyes, and his face also stiffened, feeling that he might not be able to successfully retrieve the water. Sure enough, just as Rosen turned on 2 faucets at the same time and flushed the white water resources into 2 large iron buckets, the 2 staff members stood up from their seats at the same time. One of them had a gust of wind under his feet and came to Rosen in front of him, tightening one of the faucets and frowning as he looked at Rosen. Then he pointed to the notice posted on the wall and said coldly, "Didn't you see the notice? Each person can only take a maximum of 3 liters of water per day, and registration is required. A standard daily supplement of 1.5 liters of water can ensure the health of the body. 3 liters of water is enough to deal with drinking water problems, and even the remaining water can barely wipe the body. For a family of 3, 9 liters of water is enough for a cold shower. In fact, it's not just the water collection room that strictly controls the water intake, but there are also people in the bathroom who specifically control it. The water used to flush the toilet is also flushed by 2 people after using fire once. Thousands of people are taking refuge in air raid shelters, generating an astonishing amount of water every day. Compared to how many people there are in a village, and sharing a well in a village is barely enough, but now we are facing a population several times larger than the village, and it is still uncertain how long we need to take shelter. If the groundwater in the area is depleted one day, the series of problems it will cause may be the last straw to crush camels for people who are already anxious about survival in a disaster. To be honest, Rosen did see the notice on the wall for the first time. Because there is a lot of traffic here every day, he didn't pay attention to the announcement, and the amount of water received each time does not exceed 2 liters, mainly for drinking. As for taking a shower. In this cold weather, not only Rosen, but most men choose to wash once a month because the cold causes slow metabolism in the body, and not taking a shower for 1 or 2 weeks doesn't make them feel much smelly. Moreover, in harsh environments, people's demand for maintaining their image has also decreased, and washing them thoroughly does not make much sense. Of course, those who go out to search for supplies will be slightly more diligent in cleaning their wounds and dirt, and taking showers if they are injured. "Sorry, I didn't notice the announcement before," Rosen apologized. The staff remained calm and gave a sense of meticulousness. After pouring all the water from one iron bucket into the other, they then poured the water from the bucket into the prepared 3-liter volumetric cup, which happened to reach 3 liters. Then he poured the water back into one of the iron buckets and said, "If everyone were to hold water in a big iron bucket like you, how long would this last? You don't know the situation outside, so be careful." Listening to the education of the staff, Rosen couldn't help but feel slandered. After all, he risked breaking the rules for the sake of livelihood projects, but his major project cannot be disclosed to others for the time being. Carrying half a bucket of water back to the room, Rosen turned around and locked the door, then entered the greenhouse of the shelter system. Looking at the water that was less than 1/3 of the height of the bucket wall, he sighed and said, "I feel like this water resource is not enough to irrigate the seedlings, and the system cannot exchange upgrade points for water resources." Although it was clear that it was not enough for irrigation, Rosen still planted sweet potato seedlings on the black soil in the greenhouse. The black soil is soft and does not harden, and can be planted without plowing. Rosen plants seedlings every 2 centimeters. Although 1 acre of land is enough to plant thousands of sweet potato seedlings, he still chooses to plant in dense areas, which can save more water. After planting, it also consumed nearly 30 square meters of space. To irrigate such a large area, the small half bucket of water he had prepared was obviously not enough. However, Rosen still used his hands to scoop up water, saving a bit, and barely wetted the surface of the 30 square meters of black soil. When planting, it was not buried too deep and was still planted at an angle to the roots, barely watering the seedlings. This definitely won't work. Just pour a little shallow water every day, and if the seedlings can't hold on for a few days, they will lack water and wither. The high-level management of the external shelter has too strong control over the water source, just taking advantage of loopholes to steal water. If discovered once, the consequences are hard to say, so it's better not to take risks. Since water resources cannot rely on external shelters, we can only find a solution from the shelter system. The issue of water sources was put on the agenda by Rosen. After conducting further research on the system, he found that there happened to be a pumping station device in the unlocked node with the word water in the technology tree. Rosen's guess about it should be the pumping station, but since the technology tree contains many future technologies, this pumping station should have better performance. "I haven't unlocked it yet, probably because I didn't consume enough upgrade points," Rosen thought of this possibility. Based on current observations, unlocking new nodes on the technology tree does indeed require unlocking based on the consumption of upgrade points. For feeding these nearly 1,000 sweet potato seedlings, Rosen poured a lot of hope into it, cheering on the question of whether he could survive after his savings were used up. Of course, he can also choose to join the search team after using up his savings to face the challenges of extreme cold weather and extraterrestrial threats outside, but that's not what he should do. From the perspective of sacrificing one's life or considering future human survival, he must strive to ensure his own safety, develop and expand the shelter, so that humans can see hope for survival in the future. Otherwise, if the resources outside are emptied one day, the human survivors will be killed by monsters. A shelter that can accommodate a large population and provide sufficient living resources is enough to continue human civilization. With a strong sense of mission and survival pressure, Rosen couldn't fall asleep all night. He stayed up until early in the morning until he saw that the system had increased by 100 upgrade points, and his face lit up with joy. Open the technology tree to check. Currently, what he needs most is technology related to food and water. Considering that the greenhouse still lacks irrigation pipes, Rosen will use all 100 upgrade points to purchase materials. The materials used for making drip irrigation equipment mainly include PE hoses, embedded pressure compensation drip heads, hot melt adhesives, etc. A total of 100 upgrade points were consumed. At this moment, Rosen finally saw the pumping station node on the technology tree lit up. In addition, many nodes were actually lit up, and the entire technology tree looked even more lush. Rosen opened a narrow slit outlet along the direction perpendicular to the cross-dot section of the PE pipeline, and then connected the embedded pressure compensation drip head to the inner wall of the PE pipeline through hot melt adhesive. This installed the irrigation accessories, but it was not enough. The entire drip irrigation system also includes the central control room, frequency conversion cabinet, filter, fertilizer applicator, etc., which needs to be exchanged separately with upgrade points. Currently, he does not have enough upgrade points to exchange. However, before that, the pipeline can be buried in advance. Drip irrigation facilities need to be pre-buried in the soil to allow water to flow directly to the roots. Fortunately, enough space is reserved during planting, which can just bury these pipes. Drip irrigation pipes are suitable for quick burial in sandy soil at a depth of 3 to 5 centimeters, while black soil, black 5-flower soil, white 5-flower soil, and alkaline soil are suitable for shallow burial, only requiring a depth of 2 to 3 centimeters, so digging pits is not a big project. After burying the pipeline, Rosen looked forward to the 100 upgrade points tomorrow. It wasn't until the water pump was redeemed that his greenhouse truly had the freedom of water resources. As for the remaining facilities in the greenhouse, we can only wait a few more days. I really want to recruit a helper to settle in my shelter now. This way, not only will I have a helper, but my daily upgrade points will also double. Unfortunately, there are no people I truly trust, and I don't know how Lao Luo is doing now. Thinking of Lao Luo, a hint of bitterness appeared in Rosen's heart and he became worried again. He doesn't have many familiar people in this air raid shelter, and even the Lao Wang family is just a matter of looking up but not looking down. They can't expect their family to treat him as their own. Rosen is afraid that Lao Wang will trick him, so he doesn't want to lure them into the shelter for now. Otherwise, there will be an additional 300 upgrade points every day, isn't it fragrant? If there are too many people who know the secret, it will be difficult for it to become a secret again, and this is something we must guard against. Thinking about where Lao Luo was, Rosen brought back half a bucket of water and proceeded with today's watering task. After watering yesterday, there were some clumps on the surface of the soil due to incomplete watering, which is not very optimistic. Rosen cleared the soil layer to check the condition of the seedlings planted yesterday and found a slight yellowing at the roots. He went to Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com and some of them began to wrinkle. Rosen's brow immediately furrowed, and he was worried if they could hold on until tomorrow. So, tonight was another sleepless night. Rosen didn't fall asleep until 11 o'clock in the evening because he was too tired. He had a nightmare and dreamed that nearly 1,000 sweet potato seedlings he had planted had died in the ground. He suddenly woke up and quickly checked the time on his watch. It was already 2 o'clock in the morning. You can get upgrade points at midnight, and Rosen missed 2 hours. In 2 hours, the seedlings may die due to water shortage. Rosen couldn't help but slap himself twice and fell asleep at such an important juncture. Immediately, he entered the greenhouse and checked the condition of the seedlings. After seeing that the situation was not significantly different from the daytime inspection, Rosen breathed a little sigh of relief. Open the technology tree and see the additional 100 upgrade points on the interface. Without hesitation, they were used on the pump station node. You have consumed 100 upgrade points and exchanged them for a pumping station. The pumping station is a sub-node of the agriculture node under the shelter node, which is an agricultural irrigation instrument. Its function is to extract water resources from deep underground. It can locate deep underground and make turns, accurately reaching the groundwater area. This is also the advantage of the pumping station compared to the pumping station, and it is the description information that can be viewed after unlocking this node. After the water pump was exchanged, a 2-meter-tall cylindrical metal equipment appeared in the corner of the greenhouse. It was only then that Rosen realized that this equipment belonged to the greenhouse. There is a 1-ton capacity reservoir inside the pumping station, which only operates automatically when the water level drops. When it appears, Rosen hears the roar of the drilling rig, causing the ground to vibrate slightly. Chapter 7. Improving Greenhouses. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push. This is a pumping station detecting underground water sources, which lasted for 2 hours before the ground stopped shaking. Immediately after, a jet of muddy yellow water gushed out from the outlet above the pumping station. Seeing the successful extraction of groundwater, even though the water was still murky, Rosen's big stone in his heart was lowered. The pumping station has a filtering function, and after 2 minutes, clear water flows out. Of course, this water is not yet directly drinkable and can only be used as irrigation water. Rosen moved out 2 large iron buckets and filled them with clear groundwater. He then returned to the field where sweet potato seedlings were planted, completely watering the soil. Looking at the soaked black soil, a relieved expression finally appeared on his face. The problem of irrigation water has been solved, at least to ensure the survival of sweet potato seedlings. He looked at the greenhouse dome again. Initially, the greenhouse only provided one incandescent light, which was on 24 hours a day, and its power came from the overall greenhouse system. Rosen did not find any power generation facilities inside the greenhouse, and could only speculate that the power source came from outside. As for where the electricity came from, it cannot be Rosen's shelter because that shelter is currently not powered on and needs to be upgraded to a power room to generate electricity for the shelter. This greenhouse system is like a subsystem module independent of the shelter. No wonder it occupies 0 square meters of space, as it does not occupy the space of the shelter. In comparison, every square meter of space in the shelter is precious, and upgrading requires 100 upgrade points per square meter. Having an independent power source in the greenhouse also saves a lot of trouble, but the only incandescent light is difficult to ensure the photosynthesis of plants. Now that the seedlings have not yet broken through, it is necessary to consider the issue of crop photosynthesis in the future. A fluorescent lamp is sufficient to illuminate the greenhouse, but there are 20 reserved positions for installing lamps on the top of the greenhouse. The function is definitely not as simple as lighting. He looked up the nodes related to lighting fixtures on the technology tree, and found alternative solutions through screening. The lighting fixtures used to promote plant photosynthesis are called plant fill lights, including high-pressure sodium lamps, HID lamps, laser lamps, LED fill lights, etc. Among them, sodium lamps have the highest photosynthetic efficiency and are widely used for supplementing light in crops. LEDs and some laser lights can only emit monochromatic light such as blue, yellow, green, red, and orange, and monochromatic light used for plant supplementary lighting can easily lead to plant overgrowth, which is the phenomenon of seedling jumping. Based on the above considerations, Rosen chose sodium lamp as the supplementary light, which can emit golden white light and has the advantages of high luminous efficiency, low power consumption, long lifespan, and strong fog penetration ability. The exchange price happens to be at the upgrade point of 5, and he will be able to complete the installation of 20 locations inside the greenhouse the next day. In this case, the remaining components of his drip irrigation equipment will need to be delayed for a few more days before they can be exchanged. Leaving the greenhouse and returning to the room where the air raid shelter had been renovated, Rosen felt a little at ease. The solution to the problem of plant irrigation had already wiped out one of his major troubles. The temperature difference between the two planes caused a rapid cooling of the body, and then Rosen felt the body cells shivering all over his body. If you don't have to deal with the daily rounds, it's not a problem to stay in your own shelter space or greenhouse all day, which will make your body feel much more comfortable. The high-rise buildings of the anti-aircraft shelter need to conduct daily rounds to prevent people from starving or freezing to death in the room without being detected in time, causing decay in odor, and subsequently creating various infectious diseases. For this closed anti-aircraft shelter, it will be a terrible disaster. Just after the staff sent by the senior management completed the rounds, Rosen heard the voices of people talking as they walked outside. It seems that 2 or 3 people have frozen to death recently. In a cold and hungry environment, it is more likely to freeze to death than to starve. Hunger leads to insufficient energy supply to the body, resulting in a loss of the ability to regulate body temperature. The bodies of those who were frozen to death were stiff and straight. Rosen had seen someone transport frozen corpses out and risk abandoning them far away from the shelter. After all, they cannot be directly abandoned at the entrance of the cave to avoid attracting extraterrestrial creatures, and the survivors inside may be ambushed. Rosen heard the person outside the door talk about other situations. Have you heard that the last time our shelter went out searching for supplies, someone saw live people outside? Living people outside. The next air raid shelter is at least 15 kilometers away from our side. Is it really possible to walk this far to get around here? You should know that the highest temperature outside is -5 degrees Celsius, and the duration is not long. With all the transportation outside frozen, it is difficult to walk such a long distance just by walking. Considering the physical energy consumption and low temperature, the only possibility is to use unfrozen transportation. Of course, the prerequisite is that when the other party takes the transportation vehicle out of the shelter, the temperature happens to be at the highest temperature of the day. If it stays outside for too long, the transportation vehicle will also be scrapped. Setting aside the issue of bearing structure being frozen and unable to operate, if the vehicle is a gasoline-powered vehicle, diesel will slowly solidify into wax at -10 degrees Celsius, while gasoline has a freezing point of -60 degrees Celsius. If the vehicle is an electric vehicle, the electrolyte in the battery is likely to solidify at -7 degrees Celsius, causing the vehicle to lose energy supply. In fact, there have been extreme low temperatures below -50 degrees Celsius in the north, and transportation can still operate outside. There is only a risk of being frozen when stopped, but as long as the ice layer is removed, it can be reused. The difference lies in the extreme cold this time, where there is a cat trick inside. There is a white ice mist blowing in the air, which plays a cooling role. When anything is exposed to the outside, the surface immediately begins to freeze. Only by moving can personnel searching for supplies avoid being frozen in. Otherwise, if they remain motionless for a minute, the ice layer on their bodies will be 1 centimeter thick. If they fall asleep outside, they will never wake up for a lifetime. The people outside continued to talk. Our search team asked him about the safe haven and only then found out that he came from a nearby hospital, which is only 5 kilometers away. They also ran to this area to search for supplies. Hospitals. Haven't they been frozen? How did they survive in the hospital? It is said to be living in an underground morgue. In addition to our air raid shelter, some basements can also ensure that people live inside without being threatened by extreme cold weather. Basement. Underground morgue. The people outside had already walked away as they spoke, while Rosen pondered the topic they were discussing. It turns out it's not just an air raid shelter, as long as it's underground, safety can be guaranteed, and of course, insulation measures have also been taken. It can be inferred that extremely cold weather cannot easily penetrate deep below the surface. The animals that burrow and hibernate outdoors may still be able to survive a small portion. In fact, the situation is not as extreme as Rosen previously thought. The danger is only on the surface, and underground is relatively safe, just a bit cold. In the afternoon of that day, there was a bit more noise inside the shelter, and the originally peaceful art style was disrupted. Several tall and burly men were shouting loudly. It is understood that those few people secretly scattered the diesel found by the search team on the ground and ignited it, creating a raging fire that raised the surrounding temperature to -15 degrees Celsius. The diesel they wasted was enough to keep the generator working for half a day, but even if it was ignited directly, it could only maintain a temperature rise for more than 10 minutes, and soon the temperature dropped again. Shuang is refreshing, but this warm feeling comes and goes quickly, which attracts the attention of the senior management of the shelter. The staff immediately condemned these people, asked them to go back and write a review, and punished them by depriving them of water for a week. The public sentiment in the shelter has always been in a state of disharmony, and there have been several conflicts due to food distribution issues. This punishment immediately ignited the anger of the few strong men who took the initiative to beat up the staff. Furthermore, it triggered a group brawl between the staff and the few strong men. After learning about the situation, the senior management took it seriously and immediately held a meeting with the people under their command to urge them to strictly monitor public goods and avoid the occurrence of theft of public goods again. At the same time, they also provided psychological counseling to avoid conflicts with refugees again. Refugees require the supply and arrangement of a high-level team, and the high-level team also cannot do without refugees joining the search team, bringing back enough supplies from outside. They have a mutually beneficial relationship and are worried about irreconcilable internal conflicts between each other. In the future, there will be no need for natural disasters and alien invasion, and both of them may consume their own lives. But just 3 days later, a true internal turmoil erupted inside the shelter. The root of this contradiction and conflict comes from the class division formed by the wealth gap. In the past, everyone lived on the ground, and due to geographical isolation, even if there was a wealth gap, the word hating the rich was not written on their faces. Poor and wealthy people can live together in air raid shelters, with limited living space. Poor people huddle together, while wealthy people huddle together, resisting the participation of the poor. For the wealthy, they only associate with valuable people, and there are almost no people in their circle who cannot afford to eat. Even so far, even if they can only eat 2 meals a day, the food they eat is even more high-end pre-made dishes. Those wealthy people will also gather together for parties, pile up their stored food, and then indulge in revelry in the apocalypse, living much more carefree than the poor. Even though the top management has restricted the monopoly of goods by the wealthy, in fact, the wealthy still monopolize a lot of goods, and they also have their own search teams under their command, which can also go out to search for goods. The trigger for this unprecedented conflict lies in the fact that the search teams of the wealthy have gone out too frequently. As the rich gather more and more supplies, the senior management of the shelter cannot help but worry. After all, the distance for everyone to go out and search is limited, and their physical fitness and environmental conditions do not allow them to leave too far. The surrounding materials may also be depleted one day. The search teams of the wealthy are deployed too frequently, which not only easily attracts extraterrestrial creatures from outside, but also consumes nearby supplies in advance, leading to food disasters. Moreover, the materials collected by these wealthy people will not be shared. They would rather organize a group of wealthy people to have a party and consume these materials at will, rather than contribute some to the shelter. The favorite thing for the rich is to create a wealth gap and then use it to gain a sense of superiority, in order to enslave more poor people. Those poor people who were enslaved worked for them like livestock, receiving only the most basic compensation every day. The senior management sent people to investigate the living conditions of these wealthy people and found that they lived in luxury and decadence. Many poor girls were willing to become their playthings for food, and the original civilized order inside the air raid shelter was spoiled by these people. At that time, the staff couldn't bear it and had a physical conflict with the group of wealthy people. The specific reason was that one of the staff's girlfriends became the little girlfriend of one of the wealthy people and was caught by him. This conflict came and went quickly, and the problem was finally resolved by high-level officials taking action to suppress it and confiscating the wealth of the wealthy. It is said that several people died and their bodies were discarded outside the air raid shelter. It is evident that senior management cannot sit idly by regarding the disorderly behavior inside the shelter. When it truly threatens the sustainable survival and interests of the shelter, the senior management will definitely strike hard. Later, it was heard that the group of search teams hired by the wealthy were also banned and disbanded. In 3 or 4 days, Rosen learned about what had happened inside the shelter of the air raid shelter. While sighing, he also realized that the upgrade of the shelter system was urgent. He quickly expanded the shelter to accommodate everyone, arranged work for everyone, and provided them with sufficient food. Similar bloodshed incidents could also be eradicated. In recent days, Rosen has also exchanged his daily increase of 100 upgrade points for technology products in the technology tree. As a result, more nodes have been unlocked, and the technology tree has become even more prosperous. And his greenhouse has also been improved in the past few days. After installing 20 sodium lamps to compensate for photosynthesis, the drip irrigation system in the greenhouse has also been fully installed. The central control room, frequency conversion cabinet, filter, fertilizer applicator, and the rest of the drip irrigation facilities were successfully installed in the corner of the greenhouse at a cost of 400 upgrade points, and are now operating in an orderly manner. With drip irrigation facilities, Rosen no longer needed to manually irrigate sweet potato seedlings. This crude task was completely handed over to the drip irrigation system, and he only needed to adjust the timing and duration of irrigation every day. During nighttime observation, Rosen discovered that the sweet potato seedlings had already broken through the soil, growing 2 green leaves, and the embryo in the middle began to extract new tender leaves. Seeing this scene, Rosen had another longing for the future. When the sweet potato harvest came, he no longer needed the food provided by the shelter and could survive well. It took almost a week from perfecting the greenhouse to the emergence of sweet potato seedlings. Within this week, as prices rose, the price of a piece of bread rose from the initial $200 to $600, with a terrifying rate of price increase. So far, only those families with savings can afford this expense, and life is relatively comfortable. Most people have long been forced to choose to join the search team, risking their lives for a bite of food every day. Time flies by so fast. Rosen's 10,000 yuan deposit has also been used up now, and the speed is even faster than he thought. Although the sweet potatoes in the greenhouse are already lush with branches and leaves, the parts growing underground are still small bumps, far from the time when they can be harvested. It is impossible for Rosen to choose to eat them at this time. After much thought, he had to make an adventurous decision, which was to join the search team. Chapter 8. First outing to search for supplies, planting radish in a greenhouse. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, the plan couldn't keep up with the changes. Rosen's original plan was to rely on savings to support the harvest of the first batch of sweet potatoes, but in reality, the pace of price increases was too fast, and daily expenses on food were increasing day by day. Before starving to death, he could only temporarily join the search team and risk going out to search for supplies. Stay close to me when you go out, don't talk if you have nothing to do, and don't run around if you don't want to harm anyone, old Wang warned Rosen before opening the door. The search team used a flamethrower to bake the steel gate, melting the ice layer that imprisoned it. When the thick gate opened, a half-meter thick ice layer came into view, and to go out, the ice layer needed to be chiseled open. Although the ice layer makes every outing particularly troublesome, it plays a role in protecting the shelter, making it impossible to see the entrance of the shelter from outside. The members of the search team first cut a hole that allowed one person to get out, first sent one person to investigate the outside situation, and confirmed that there was no alien activity, so they all picked up the shovel and then dug the surrounding ice. The first team is heading east, the second team is heading north, and the third team is following me to the west, the battalion commander issued orders. The search team consists of about 60 people and is divided into 3 parts. Rosen's team is responsible for heading east to the Life supermarket 5 kilometers away, with Lao Wang serving as the team leader. You'll follow me then, old Wang said to Rosen. Neighbors are more likely to cultivate feelings and support each other, especially in a post-apocalyptic environment, where trust in neighbors is greater. Rosen nodded and followed closely behind old Wang. As he was on his way, his eyes were vigilant as he looked around, searching for the rumored extraterrestrial creatures. According to the experience of the search team going out for food, if the team encounters an extraterrestrial creature going out for food, it may lose at least 3 to 5 people, and at most, it may lose more than half of the personnel. This also depends on luck. If one is unlucky enough to encounter a large group of extraterrestrial creatures going out for food, they can only recognize the species. Rosen often heard people returning from outside talking about extraterrestrial creatures inside the air raid shelter, and the descriptions they uttered were often ferocious, terrifying, and unimaginable. Some people said that extraterrestrial creatures were a combination of lizards and spiders, while others said it was a combination of centipedes and scorpions, all sorts of strange things. Rosen could only summarize that the so-called extraterrestrial creatures were the sowing monsters of animals and plants already on Blue Star. You can imagine what it looks like in your mind, but what do actual extraterrestrial creatures look like? What is the size of the body? Is the fusion of different species sewn together with needles and thread? Won't there be a phenomenon of body rejection? With doubts in mind, Rosen developed a strong curiosity towards extraterrestrial creatures. He wanted to see the appearance of aliens to satisfy his inner curiosity, but also did not want to encounter them. He hoped that this time out, he could safely return. If he was lucky enough to discover the tissue cells of different vegetables, it would be an unexpected joy. Only those who have witnessed and survived the terrifying nature of extraterrestrial creatures truly understand their terrifying nature. Rosen heard them murmuring softly, praying not to encounter extraterrestrial creatures. Perhaps in response to everyone's wishes, no extraterrestrial creatures were found searching for food on the 5-kilometer journey. The search team, including Lao Wang, breathed a sigh of relief. Looking at the nearby Life supermarket, old Wang gestured and everyone followed in an orderly manner into the interior of the supermarket. The last time they left the Life supermarket, all the doors and windows were tightly locked. Just now, when they entered, old Wang took out the key from his pocket and opened it, indicating that it was absolutely safe inside. After everyone entered, old Wang closed the door again. The supermarket has 5 floors in total. The first floor is mainly the food area, with drinks, snacks, daily necessities, and salt outside, and fresh vegetables and fruits inside. Old Wang ordered 5 members to go upstairs, and the rest followed him to search for food on the first floor. Considering physical fitness and long distances, prioritize moving lightweight items. You should know that each of them is wearing thick thermal protective suits, and they need to be careful of possible extraterrestrial creatures when running 5 kilometers. They are already physically and mentally exhausted, and their protective suits are filled with cold sweat. Their footsteps are becoming heavier, and carrying 2 heavy items will only affect their smooth return to the air raid shelter. Old Wang pulled out a snake-skin bag from his backpack behind him. He had rich experience and prioritized putting high-calorie foods from the snack rack into the snake-skin bag. These foods are not very heavy and can be carried a lot at once, and high-calorie foods are easier to carry. Rosen, on the other hand, delved deeper into the vegetable and fruit area, hoping to find the frozen vegetable tissue inside, but he was somewhat disappointed. The area where vegetables and fruits are being hoarded is covered in thick ice, and at first glance, there are white flowers everywhere, but the vegetables buried under the ice are not visible. Rosen could only use a shovel to chisel into the thick ice layer again and again, trying to dig out the vegetables inside, but the shovel bent its head, and only a small part of the ice layer was chiseled off. Lao Wang approached and said, "Don't worry about frozen vegetables. The main thing is to get more snacks. We only have 2 hours of round-trip time." Upon hearing Lao Wang's reminder, Rosen's face didn't look very good. Now the outdoor temperature is only -5 degrees, and the air is slowly blowing with white frost. After 2 hours, the temperature will drop by at least 20 degrees, and the flowing white frost in the air will also become fierce. Even if wearing protective clothing and exposed to the cold wind outside, it is easy to freeze. After cooling down, the vitality of extraterrestrial organisms increases, and the probability of encountering extraterrestrial organisms increases significantly. I know, you should fill me with snacks first, just let me know when you leave. Rosen handed his snakeskin bag to Wang, while he continued to chisel ice with a shovel. In the months leading up to the apocalypse, everyone can only eat junk food, and over time, they forget about the taste of green vegetables. Moreover, due to a lack of vitamin supplements, their bodies gradually become unhealthy and are prone to getting sick due to a lack of vitamins. The thick ice layer that solidifies in the vegetable area is much harder than the usual ice layer. Rosen speculates that this is due to the vegetables being infused with a considerable amount of liquid medicine, combined with a humidifier constantly replenishing water, which solidifies and becomes even harder. After his unremitting efforts, he opened the ice layer and found a hard frozen white carrot from the ice. It was half a meter long and had a thick bowl, as if it had been overused with hormones. Rosen finally managed to remove it from the ice layer and weighed it in his hand, feeling heavy. It should weigh 20 pounds. At this moment, old Wang came over carrying 2 bulging snake skin bags and informed Rosen that it was time to go back. Rosen opened one of the snake skin bags and threw the frozen radish inside. He carried the snake skin bag and followed old Wang away. The snake skin bag carrying it on the back was noticeably heavy. Previously, it was filled with puffed food, and the weight was very light. The radish inside was much heavier than all the puffed food combined, and soon Rosen felt noticeably tired. There are still 3 kilometers left to safely return to the air raid shelter, which is like running a marathon for him. Xiao Luo, keep up. You're slowing down, said old Wang, who was running ahead. If you feel like you're not doing well, just throw away something. The radish you just put in can be completely thrown away. You can't throw it away. The biggest gain from going out this time is this carrot, Rosen said. Just throw away all the snacks in the snake skin bag and keep the radish, but the weight is almost all on the radish. Rosen thinks there's no need to throw away anything. Old Wang, I can't run anymore. You guys go first, I'll take it slow, Rosen stopped and said. His feet were so cold that he couldn't feel anything and there were a lot of blisters on them, which wasn't a problem, but carrying heavy objects and running for 2 kilometers on his back was already the limit for him, who usually lacks exercise. Just now, running with no load has already consumed a lot of physical energy. Now I have to carry something back and my physical strength has long been depleted. Be careful, hurry up and recover your strength, follow up. Old Wang said in front of him, but he didn't dare to stop. He knew that once he stopped, he might not be able to run anymore. With inertia, he could resist his body's inertia, but he clearly panted a bit while speaking. Not to mention Rosen, who had just stopped, felt various uncomfortable phenomena emerging in his body, and his whole body was sore and weak. Ha! Ha! Sitting on the ice, Rosen gasped for a moment. His gaze still focused on the snow-white environment around him, and at that moment, he was most afraid of the appearance of extraterrestrial creatures. Although he was curious about what extraterrestrial creatures looked like in his heart, he was curious enough not to block his own life. After all, curiosity killed the cat. When I looked up now, I couldn't see any trace of the search team. A layer of ice had formed on the surface of Rosen's protective suit. If it weren't for the insulation effect of the suit, his skin would have started to freeze, and the freezing effect would continue to penetrate into his body. In less than 2 minutes, there would be multiple ice sculptures. Even with protective clothing, the body temperature still reaches below 0, and once held still, it feels like the body temperature is dissipating faster. Feeling almost at rest, as Rosen struggled to get up from the ice, his protective suit creaked and the surface ice layer shattered and fell off. At this moment, Rosen vaguely saw a 2-meter-tall black figure on the street 100 meters away. The figure took on the shape of a human, with ferocious spikes attached to its surface, and 9 cobra heads hovering above its head. 9-headed snake. At the moment of seeing that strange black shadow, Rosen instantly forgot about the coldness of his body. The unknown creature in front of him made him feel scared. The descriptions of extraterrestrial creatures in the air raid shelter once came to mind, and the imagined images of extraterrestrial creatures gnawing on humans flashed like a lantern. Before seeing extraterrestrial creatures, there was still some curiosity in his heart, but after seeing them, only fear remained. Next, he completely relied on his body's instincts to escape the sight range of extraterrestrial beings before they discovered him. However, the temperature quickly dropped a lot, and for the first time, Rosen felt an incredibly slow movement, as if he was tied with a shot put, and every step was heavy. After walking the last kilometer, Rosen saw that the air raid shelter gate was within reach, and the team members wearing heavy protective suits were waving at him. The howling cold wind covered their calls, and the scene before him was gradually obscured by frost. Rosen, relying on his position judgment, successfully returned to the air raid shelter. As soon as he entered the gate, he felt like he had entered a furnace from an ice cellar. The temperature inside the air raid shelter remains above 0.5 degrees, but outside it is already around -20 degrees. The white frost in the air can condense any unprotected living body into an ice sculpture in minutes. 60 people were dispatched to search for supplies this time, but only 40 people returned. Among them, the team leader leading the westward direction has not yet returned. There is a gas station 3 kilometers west, and the daily fuel consumption inside the air raid shelter is brought from there, which is much closer than the nearby large supermarket. However, none of the people led by the captain have returned yet. Until 2 hours later, the temperature outside dropped to -50 degrees Celsius, and the white frost in the air roared recklessly. Even wearing protective clothing at this time, the raging white frost would condense into ice sculptures within a minute. That mysterious white frost is like a coagulant, with a strong freezing effect. After discussion, the senior management believes that the team that went to collect fuel has been destroyed. In order to maintain fuel consumption in the air raid shelter, they have decided to send a new team the next day to bring back the fuel. Before handing in the food, Rosen hid the frozen radish in a corner. After the food was handed in, he took advantage of the absence of anyone to retrieve the radish in the corner, returned to his 5 square meter small room, locked the door, and then brought the radish into the shelter space. Input the radish into a seed culture dish for analysis. Dissolving plant tissue. Starting to strip genes from tissue cells. Genetic analysis. Successful analysis. It is a herbaceous plant of the Brassicaceae family, commonly known as the white radish, mainly distributed in the northern and northeastern regions of the Porcelain Territory. Reshaping seeds based on genes. Please wait. Successfully reshaped and obtained 10,000 white radish seeds. Open the lid of the culture dish, and a large pot filled with dense white seeds catches your eye. 10,000 seeds. Did you exchange so many this time because the seeds are relatively small? Rosen remembers that there were only 1,000 sweet potato seeds before, and the ratio of volume to white radish seeds should be 10.1. It can be determined that the number of seeds produced in the culture dish is not related to the size of the input tissue, but is closely related to the volume of the culture dish. The number of seeds produced in the culture dish is just enough to fill the disc-shaped container. This also made Rosen feel some confusion. The raw materials for making seeds in culture dishes do not come from the input plant tissue. The input tissue is only used for genetic analysis. But producing seeds necessarily requires external input of raw materials, otherwise it would violate the law of conservation of matter. Considering the eventual disappearance of the input tissue, Rosen speculates that it is possible that the culture dish absorbs energy from the environment, allowing tissue cells to rapidly proliferate and divide, forming seeds. As for the specific internal operation process, it is unknown. After all, this instrument contains future technology and cannot be easily inferred by him. There are too many radish seeds, and Lawson does not intend to increase the germination rate of seeds through vigorous planting, as there are too many seeds, which is troublesome. Carrots grown in the field for too long without harvesting may rot. If it were sweet potatoes, they would grow new buds on the fruit, and bury them in the soil to continuously grow new plants, making them less prone to decay. That is to say, radishes are less likely to be stored in the field for a long time than sweet potatoes. Rosen adopts a pit of 3 seeds to reasonably allocate the planting positions of these 10,000 carrot seeds. Even if the survival rate is not high, a large amount of carrots can be harvested, and even if they cannot be eaten completely, they can be made into dried radish. And he believes that by then, his shelter may have already added a certain population, and the carrots he produces may not be consumed by himself alone. The new population will also bring more upgrade points every day, significantly accelerating the construction of shelter space, which is also a win-win situation. He has also been considering whether he can bring in the Wang family recently. After all, after spending a few months together, the Wang people are quite good. Chapter 9. Sweet Potato Harvest, inviting old Wang's family to settle in the shelter. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push. He thought about this issue multiple times and finally made a decision that he would bring it up to old Wang when the vegetables in the greenhouse were harvested for the first time. There must be a 3-chapter agreement at that time, and old Wang must be kept quiet about the space in the shelter. There must be the temptation of the first batch of food, and the old Wang family will definitely cooperate with him when they see hope for the future. The first harvest of vegetables seems to be a few months away. Before that, I really had to maintain a speed of 100 upgrade points per day to slowly exchange technology and develop shelter space, which was extremely slow. Rosen then focused his attention on the growth nutrient solution that had been unlocked long ago under the agriculture node of the technology tree. Growth rate nutrient solution, applied together with fertilizer to plants, can significantly accelerate plant growth and harvest. This is the description of the growth rate nutrient solution. As for the large amplitude mentioned on the plant, Rosen is quite curious about how large the amplitude can be. So he exchanged a bottle, which could mix 1 cubic meter of dissolved fertilizer solution, and then applied it together to the roots of the plants through fertilization. In Rosen's entire drip irrigation system, the water source is connected to a filter, and the water resources are filtered out to remove large particulate matter from the water, avoiding clogging of the capillary pipes of the filtration system. The filtered water then passes through the fertilizer applicator, where the water fertilizer solution flows out. His fertilizer applicator has a capacity of 20 liters and only requires 1/50th bottle of growth rate nutrient solution. As for the ratio of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium fertilizer inside the applicator, it is 2.3.1, and a small amount of frequent fertilization strategy is adopted. Therefore, Rosen needs to use up a whole bottle of growth rate nutrient solution in 50 batches. The next day, a group of search teams with around 20 members have gone out of the air raid shelter outside. The original rule was to go out once a month, but when they went out yesterday, none of the 3 teams came back alive. It should be noted that the responsibility of the 3 teams was to transport back fuel, which is the main energy source inside the air raid shelter and cannot be easily calculated like this. Furthermore, what exactly happened to Team 3 also requires later players to investigate the situation in order to do their homework for subsequent actions. After the search team returned from their trip today, they brought a shocking news. A bloody massacre occurred at a gas station 3 kilometers west, with headless bodies on the ground and their stomachs torn open. The internal organs inside were all eaten clean by extraterrestrial creatures. This is an extraterrestrial creature that only likes to eat human organs, and it can be speculated that it has cut off human heads, possibly collected as loot, just like some alien invasion-themed movies people have watched before the end of the day. The large extraterrestrial intelligent creatures are accustomed to collecting human skulls for bracelets. After all, The search team did not find the lost head of the body amidst the terrifying flesh and blood on the ground, so this sensational speculation began to spread. The news also reached Rosen's ears, making him grateful that he was not assigned to the third team when he went out yesterday. Otherwise, his first outing would have been fatal. Fortunately, the aliens who killed members of Team 3 yesterday did not appear today, so the search team dispatched today did not fail their mission, transporting enough fuel for a month back to the air raid shelter. The news of the complete annihilation of the search team is gradually being forgotten by people. In this precarious apocalypse, the main concern is still the issue of satiety. As for the degree of danger outside, it is absolutely safe when not going out. 3 days later, by comparing the changes in the sweet potato plants before and after, Rosen clearly saw the difference. After being nourished by the growth rate nutrient solution in nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium fertilizer, the plants clearly flourished, and the number of leaves increased in a row. There used to be a lot of space to settle in the sweet potato planting area on the farmland, but now it is densely covered with the stems and leaves of sweet potato plants. When walking on it, you have to worry about trampling on these plants. After all, they were hard planted by Rosen, just like your own child. Looking at the white radish field again, there are also 3 or 2 plants that have broken through the soil and are growing very well. Rosen cut off the slightly weaker growth, leaving only the strongest one. With more room for growth, the growth of the white radish became even more rampant. Rosen was somewhat curious about the chemical composition of the growth rate nutrient solution. Initially, he thought it should be indole 0.3. Acetic acid, but now he doesn't think so. The artificially synthesized indole 0.3. Acetic acid does not have such a strong effect. The growth rate nutrient solution should be the result of some kind of biotechnology research, which can quickly store cells for division and proliferation. Of course, he also considered that this effect may be similar to pulling up seedlings to promote growth. For example, sweet potatoes, which originally required 120 days of light to accumulate sufficient nutrients, now only need 20 days of light to develop and mature. The accumulated light is conducive to severe shrinkage, so the corresponding water should be more sufficient. From this perspective, sweet potatoes may have become a pear-like taste. If the growth rate nutrient solution can also promote the conversion rate of plants to light, and the accumulation of organic matter can still be ensured to be sufficient even with shortened light time, then this technology is simply amazing. With this question in mind, Rosen waited until 20 days later when the sweet potatoes were ripe. Over the past 20 days, he has been eating the public food distributed in the air raid shelter, because after joining the search team, he only needs to go out once a month to ensure basic daily food. Recently, Rosen has been randomly checking the growth of sweet potato roots and stems buried underground every 3 days. It is also on this day that a large number of sweet potato stems and leaves have withered, yellowed, and fallen off on the sweet potato ground. This indicates that the sweet potatoes have matured. This is due to the action of hormones such as ethylene and abscisic acid in the plant. Once mature, these hormones will participate in the aging of the plant, causing the stems and leaves to wither, yellow, and fall off. Rosen used his hands to dig the soil, digging for the swollen roots of sweet potato plants buried deep in the soil. He then peeled open the soil layer with both hands, and in just a moment, he touched a hard object that was very large and could only be picked up with both hands. A sweet potato the size of a human head was pulled out of the ground by Rosen with roots and stems. When the crisp sound of the underground root system breaking came, Rosen stumbled backwards and sat down on the black soil, his face and body covered in black soil. He pulled out a head-sized sweet potato and smashed it on his chest, feeling a bit heavy pain. However, Rosen's face instead bloomed with joy, not caring that he was ambushed by the sweet potatoes he had grown himself. It's hard to imagine that this is a sweet potato. It can grow to such a huge size, isn't it genetically modified? Rosen himself was a bit uncertain and suspicious. After all, he doesn't understand the specific operating mechanism of the seed culture dish, and if a genetically modified process is added to it, he wouldn't know either. I also recognize genetically modified potatoes. These days, sweet potatoes can be grown, and their size is unparalleled before the end of the day. Rosen put the sweet potato with a big head into the iron bucket and washed it clean. After washing off the sand and dirt on the surface, a bright red color came into view, which was a red color between purple and red, more inclined towards red, and there were no wounds on the surface. Because there are no pests inside the greenhouse, there are no signs of insect bites. Rosen couldn't wait to cut the sweet potato open. When cutting, the resistance was very obvious, not as easy as cutting fruits, indicating that there was sufficient accumulation of organic matter inside. Sure enough, after cutting, it was found that the interior presented an uneven orange-yellow color, and the orange became thicker closer to the center. Nutrient accumulation is very sufficient, and there is no reduction in organic matter accumulation due to shortened light exposure. Rosen speculates that it may be due to the effect of growth-enhancing nutrient solution, which may have the potential to accelerate plant photosynthetic utilization efficiency. If photosynthetic efficiency is increased several times, the time will be reduced to 1/6, and the accumulated organic matter will also be the same. Of course, there are other possibilities. For example, sweet potato seeds themselves possess genes for super photosynthetic efficiency. After all, there are no sweet potato seeds in reality. When sweet potato seeds are created, it is difficult to say whether they have been manipulated or modified with specific gene fragments. Will the taste be the same as the sweet potatoes I've tried before? Rosen used to eat sweet potatoes raw because some supermarkets sell them as good-looking fruits. The feeling of eating raw is sticky and slightly crispy, and the taste is definitely not as refreshing as fruits. Taking a bite, a little white pulp flowed between his teeth, and the taste was a bit astringent, not so delicious. In other words, Rosen was not used to eating raw sweet potatoes. The taste is almost the same as that of sweet potato, but it is a sweet potato originally, which is born in viviparity and egg, and there is no big difference. Roasting it should be very satisfying. With such a large sweet potato, it's probably not as easy to bake through. As he spoke, his stomach let out a growling sound, clearly feeling hungry. Although the shelter will provide free food to search team members every day, it is also very cost-effective. It only arranges one meal per day, which is only a piece of bread. The rest is up to oneself to find ways to alleviate hunger by drinking more water, or choosing to sleep to reduce energy consumption. Sometimes Rosen would wonder, what is the meaning of these difficult days? The blue star is really at its end, and humans are forced to survive hard under cover. The former ruler of the blue star has become the food of extraterrestrial creatures, and every time he goes out, he is like a street mouse being cautious. This kind of thought is more or less felt by everyone, feeling very oppressive, but when the sweet potatoes planted by Rosen a month ago ripened, this sense of powerlessness to survive in the apocalypse disappeared from Rosen alone. The number one problem of the apocalypse is to solve the food problem, solve food production, and this problem is easily solved. Rosen will also try to bring hope to everyone in the shelter of the air raid shelter, but this matter cannot be carried out on a large scale yet. It is better to prioritize attracting people he can trust. Rosen had already planned in advance that when the sweet potato fields matured, he would inform the old Wang family of the secret of the shelter space and greenhouse. His shelter upgrade requires upgrade points, and an additional participant can earn an additional 100 upgrade points per day. Over the past 20 days, Rosen has spent 2,000 upgrade points on expanding the shelter space. 100 upgrade points were exchanged for 1 square meter of space, and 2,000 upgrade points were exchanged for a total of 20 square meters, which is equivalent to a relatively large room. In addition to the initial 10 square meters gifted by the shelter, his shelter now has a space of 30 square meters. With 2 partitions and 2 bedrooms and 1 living room, it can barely support himself and the Lao Wang family to survive. You should know that the temperature inside the shelter space is around 25 degrees above zero, which is very suitable for human survival. The Lao Wang family has no reason to refuse. Let's make a partition first. After leaving the greenhouse, Rosen thought about walking deep into the air raid shelter. He remembered that there was an unoccupied miscellaneous room at the bottom, which was piled up with construction waste and old household utensils that were unusable and discarded without anyone to manage. Rosen was using a flashlight and carefully searching inside. Occasionally, sharp objects such as thumbnails appeared on the ground, which could easily cause injuries if not careful. Rosen was careful to avoid these dangers. Gee! A big mouse darted out of the corner of the wall and quickly slipped over Rosen's foot, startling him. It seems that not all small animals have died, at least mice, a pest, have not yet become extinct. When he discovered that there were mice inside the air raid shelter, he instinctively thought of the mice stealing food from the shelter. After all, the enclosed shelter had no other exit, and the fact that the mice could survive here indicated that they had stolen food stored in the upper floors. I need to report this situation to the higher-ups later on. Don't let these pests steal all the food that the search team has worked hard to bring back. Feeling along the wall, he was indeed able to find more than 10 synthetic partitions leaning against the wall, covered in thick dust. Looking for the book garden www.zhaoshuyuan.com, a rotten breath penetrated his nostrils. I can barely come in handy, but I don't know if it can be transported into the shelter space. At this moment, a prompt appeared before my eyes. Detected, composite board ×10, do you want to enter the shelter? After Rosen chose yes with his mind, a prompt immediately appeared in front of him, asking him to choose the number of wooden boards to be transported into the shelter space. Rosen only chose to transport 3 composite boards, and the next moment he entered the shelter space, he saw the 3 composite boards lying flat on the ground. These 3 composite panels are just enough to piece together 2 5-square-meter rooms, plus a 20-square-meter living room. Great success. Although it may not be very sturdy to secure with a rope, it's barely enough. If it weren't for the privacy needs of the Wang family, Rosen actually felt that it was better not to look at the space from the next floor, but there was no way, after all, they were not so good as to have no sense of boundaries. It's time to contact Wang and his team. Arriving at the door of Wang's house, Rosen knocked a little harder and said, "Wang, it's me, Rosen." Creaking, the door opened, and old Wang poked his head out. The sound of Aunt Wang telling fairy tales to Xian came from the room. "What's up?" Old Wang asked Rosen. "I want you to see something that will surely surprise you." Rosen said mysteriously. "What is this?" Old Wang watched in surprise as Rosen pulled out a red fruit with a big head from behind. "Carrots." No, carrots aren't that big." "You kid. Where did you get this thing?" "This is sweet potato, right?" "Why is it so big?" When old Wang saw the object in Rosen's hand, he was also surprised and widened his eyes. Chapter 10. New Members X3, Kitchen Construction. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, where did it come from? I remember last time you only came back with a big carrot. Do you believe that you exchanged the sweet potato stems and leaves you gave me before? I don't believe it, even if I die, I won't believe it. Seeing old Wang shaking his head in surprise one after another, Rosen said mysteriously, "I'll tell you a secret, but you have to promise me not to reveal it to anyone else." "Can you do it?" "What secret can you tell my family?" Old Wang asked. "Sure, but it's only limited to your family." Subsequently, Rosen then told old Wang about the shelter space, and old Wang's face once again showed a look of disbelief. "I would rather believe that you dug up sweet potatoes in the air raid shelter than believe in those ghosts and monsters. It's not ghosts and snakes, it's future technology. Forget it, no matter what, you won't believe it." "Alright, I'll take you into the shelter space." "How do you get in?" Old Wang hesitated. "It's very simple. Rosen raised his hand and grabbed old Wang's shoulder, followed by a thought. The two of them were instantly teleported into the shelter space. Suddenly appearing in a dark space, old Wang felt his skin burning hot, as if he had fallen from an ice cellar into a furnace. Old Wang's first thought was to fall into purgatory. Emma, are all ghosts, snakes, and gods real? I never did anything wrong in my life, why did I suddenly fall into purgatory? Xiao Luo. Old Wang asked in panic in the darkness. I'm here, Lao Wang. Don't worry, this is actually the shelter space I told you about. It's just that the starting room has not been upgraded yet, and the surroundings are very dark. Damn it, Xiaoluo, are you sure this is not a trick? Old Wang couldn't believe it for a while, after all, things like system space are too identify. Put away your doubts, Lao Wang. These days, all extraterrestrial creatures have emerged, and the system can also be understood. Old Wang pondered Rosen's words and gradually became less surprised. You're right, but I still feel a bit too surreal. Let me slow down first. Don't delay, I'll show you another space. After saying that, Rosen grabbed old Wang's shoulder again and with a thought, led him into the greenhouse. The darkness and haze suddenly receded, and the light filled the scene before him. Old Wang swore that he had seen such a bright scene for the first time since the end of the world. Due to the global ice cover outside, the air is filled with white frost, which reduces visibility and also obstructs light. The image seen is not bright, and in order to save energy, only a few lights are occasionally turned on inside the air raid shelter. The environment is relatively dim, and long-term living can be very oppressive and heavy. Suddenly, his eyes lit up, and he had not experienced this comfortable feeling for a long time. Xiao Luo, you light so many lights in this greenhouse, where does the electricity come from? I don't know, it's probably an unlimited supply, right? Unlimited, how could it be possible? Can we provide power to the air raid shelters outside so that everyone doesn't have to risk their lives to find energy? You're thinking too much about supplying power to the air raid shelter. Even if sockets are provided here, the wires cannot be connected. Besides, this greenhouse is seamlessly integrated, and all the facilities inside are pre-set without sockets. Old Wang continued to move forward a few steps and then discovered a lush green crop field. His face was immediately surprised and he said, "Did you dig the sweet potatoes in your hand from here?" Later, he set foot on the farmland and dug up sweet potatoes with his own hands. To his surprise, he pulled out a half-meter-long sweet potato that was even larger than Rosen's hand. I couldn't help but feel happy. It should be noted that since the global freeze, the cultivation of ingredients has been a big problem. Ready-to-eat food will always be finished one day, but if ingredients can be produced and combined with simple processing techniques, unlimited food supply becomes possible. Rosen asked him to calm down a bit before telling old Wang exactly how the sweet potatoes came from and how to operate the greenhouse. So it's like this, no wonder I said last time you begged me to help you find the stems and leaves of vegetables, just to produce seeds. So you want me to visit the greenhouse because you want me to take charge of it and become the greenhouse manager in the future. No, we both joined the search team and will still be going out to search for supplies in the future. However, your family can help manage it in the greenhouse, and the temperature here is suitable for living. I was wondering if it's possible to build a small wooden house inside the greenhouse as a temporary shelter. I understand. Someone needs to go out and collect more vegetables to produce seeds, right? Old Wang quickly understood Rosen's thoughts, but still asked, can I freely enter and exit the shelter space and this greenhouse just now? If my family and I want to go outside after entering here, is there any way? Well. Rosen pondered for a moment and said, I haven't figured out a way yet. At the moment, I know that the items I come into contact with can be teleported in or out through my mind. Other methods are unclear. So, the shelter space and greenhouse are both your private spaces, and you need your consent to enter and exit. I can understand it this way, and there is no such thing as killing me to get out of the shelter space and get admission tickets, so don't think too much about it, Rosen added. Old Wang's face showed an awkward expression. Rosen caught Old Wang again and the two teleported out of the greenhouse space. Wife, Xian, we're moving. After returning, Old Wang immediately told his family the good news, and of course, the family's reaction was the same as Old Wang's at the beginning, with 100 disbeliefs. But after Rosen teleported them in, their performance was like that of Old Wang, both unbelievable and pleasantly surprised. This is actually true, isn't it a dream? Aunt Wang pinched her face and patted her cheeks, feeling an incredibly real pain. Xian, on the other hand, was already running and rolling on the field. She was already suffocated in the narrow space of the air raid shelter, and because the temperature outside was too low, she shivered and had nothing to do every day. She was living a dull life under the covers, which could only be considered survival, not life. The lush green field in front of her immediately awakened her playful nature. Old Wang followed behind and scolded Xian not to trample on the crops. Rosen glanced at the member interface of the shelter system. Current number of members. 1. Member list. Rosen, leader of the shelter. Strange, why hasn't the number of people increased? You should know that the number of members is linked to the daily upgrade points that can be obtained, and Lawson mainly brought the Lao Wang family in to expand the upgrade points. Do we still need to sign the accession agreement? Rosen's mind twitched as a reminder appeared before his eyes. Detected shelter for all intruders, please select action. Have all attacking units kill the intruder. Yes/no, Rosen clicked on no. Then a prompt pops up. Is a franchise agreement issued to intruders? Yes/no, this time, Rosen cautiously clicked yes. Then he realized that nothing had happened. But in fact, it has already had an effect. In front of Lao Wang's family of 3, refugee franchise agreement, emerged at the same time, with 2 options below. Agree, and refuse. Old Wang and Aunt Wang hesitated for a moment, fearing that this was some kind of sale agreement disguised in sheepskin, so they still wanted to open it and take a look. As for Xian, who had not yet delved into the world, she clicked to agree without looking at anything. So soon, Rosen received a system prompt again. Welcome refugee, Wang Xian, to join the shelter. Another new member of the loving family is Spicy, number of shelters. 2, member list. Rosen, shelter leader, Wang Xian, ordinary refugee LV1, 0/10. Children are always lively and active. Give them a bag of seeds, and they can give you a piece of green vegetables. Rosen saw the text in parentheses after the member name and felt strange. Why did the added refugees still have an upgrade system? Does it mean that refugees can gain experience and then upgrade as long as they contribute to the shelter? As the leader of the shelter, Rosen does not have any level or experience values, which may indicate that he was initially in the highest form. At this moment, a prompt appeared in front of Rosen's eyes. Welcome refugee, Wang Huan, to join the shelter. Another new member of the loving family is Spicy, Wang Huan, ordinary refugee LV1, 0/10. She is a great kitchen expert. If you give her any ingredients, she can cook a 5-star chef specialty dish. Aunt Wang is so skilled in cooking, so in the future, vegetables from the greenhouse can be left to her to cook. Rosen felt surprised. 2 more minutes later, Lao Wang, who was more serious about reading the agreement, also chose the agree option and joined the shelter family. Welcome refugee Wang Dahui to join the shelter. Another new member of the loving family is Spicy, Wang Dahui, ordinary refugee LV1, 0/10. A blacksmith with traditional craftsmanship, given enough materials, he can create various tools. Old Wang is also very secretive. He is actually the guardian of traditional craftsmanship, I really can't tell. Rosen was surprised again. If it weren't for Rosen being able to see their descriptions after they joined the shelter, he probably wouldn't have known for his life that these two were experts. Even Wang Xianxian, who is less than 8 years old, also demonstrates her talent in planting. This family is quite complicated. Xiao Luo, did you send out the agreement just now? Old Wang had already approached Rosen and asked. Rosen nodded. Only by agreeing to the agreement and joining the shelter can the number of people in the shelter increase, and the daily upgrade points earned can also increase. The total number of people in the shelter space is currently 4, theoretically earning 400 upgrade points per day. The speed of upgrading shelters is 4 times faster than in the past. It's impossible to say you're unhappy. Rosen opened the technology tree to view information about the kitchen. Name. Basic kitchen, description. Place for processing and cooking ingredients, consumption. 400 upgrade points, area. 0 square meters, next level unlocking nodes. Kitchenware, range hood, refrigerator, disinfection cabinet. Old Wang, I'm planning to upgrade out of the kitchen tomorrow and let Aunt Wang show us a hand then. Okay, remember to call me when you need to upgrade. Let me see how you upgraded out of the kitchen. Old Wang said with great interest. Okay, I'll call you back later. However, the 2 rooms in the shelter are currently relatively rudimentary. When we have enough upgrade points in the future, we can consider upgrading out of the room. For now, I'll trouble your family to make a mistake. No trouble, no grievance, this place is not cold, it's already very good. The Lao Wang family already felt that Rosen was very sincere. If someone else had such a shelter, they would definitely not let others know and then take it alone. Rosen's choice to open up the shelter space to them is not only because of his trust in them, but also because it shows that Rosen is not the kind of person who is selfish to the extreme. The family tidied up the things in the air raid room, tidied up the bedding on the bed, and brought it into the shelter space, making a simple floor bunk. Even if you lay on the floor in this shelter space, it's not cold at all. Even lying on the ground, you can still feel very warm. Rosen actually had already moved his bed into another room that was blocked out. At night, he slept in the adjacent compartment, listening to Aunt Wang's family telling Xianxian fairy tales. Unconsciously, he also fell asleep. This was the most peaceful sleep since the end of the world. He was an orphan from a young age, and it was Lao Luo who raised him. Lao Luo was also a rough person, but he never told him bedtime stories. Rosen regarded this as a way to make up for the lack of childhood. Thinking of Lao Luo, Rosen's mood also sank, and his worried mood resurfaced. He had a nightmare, in which old Luo waved to him in the white mist where he couldn't see his fingers. Rosen ran over with joy, wanting to punch old Luo, and then questioned him where he had been for the past 2 months, causing him to worry blindly. Only when I approached did I see that Lao Luo had frozen into an ice sculpture, and behind him appeared a monster with 9 cobra heads on top of its head, gnawing on Lao Luo's frozen body. No. Rosen suddenly sat up and realized it was a nightmare. Xiao Luo, have you had a nightmare? Rosen's exclamation also woke up old Wang next door, and he yawned and asked at the book garden www.zhaosuiyuan.com. Rosen just glanced at his watch, it was 1 o'clock in the morning. Looking at the system interface again, as expected, there are an additional 400 upgrade points on the account. It's time to upgrade out of the kitchen, Lao Wang. Didn't you want to see me upgrade the kitchen? So late, are you serious? Rosen and Lao Wang stood in a 20 square meter living room separated by the shelter space. Upgrade. In Lao Wang's view, a golden light appeared on the surface of Rosen's body. Immediately after, nothing happened, that's it, then it's gone. Old Wang waited for a while longer and exclaimed, seeing that there really wasn't any change. The kitchen has been upgraded, but it's not in the shelter space, but in a separate space, like a greenhouse. Rosen raised his hand and grabbed old Wang's shoulder, and in an instant, he teleported a thought to him. The two entered a lit 20 square meter space with a sink and stove, complete cabinets, and reserved installation space for a range hood. It can be said that only by purchasing enough electrical appliances can it be used normally. Is this the kitchen you upgraded to? It's amazing. Lao Wang gave a thumbs up and said, "It's just that there's electricity inside. Why don't there be any sockets? There's really no place left for charging." Rosen also has the same view, but it can also be understood that after all, the kitchen and greenhouse are independent systems, and all functions are pre-set, just right, but there are no reserved sockets. Rosen guessed blindly that when upgrading to appliances like induction cookers, the charging cable should be connected from the base.